Hello, friends. Did you know that nearly 80% of those who watch my videos aren't subscribed? If you enjoy the content, I'd truly appreciate it if you hit that subscribe button. It helps a lot. Also, don't forget to leave a like and share your thoughts in the comments. Your interaction not only supports the channel's growth, but also helps these stories reach more people. Thank you all for being here. By the way, where are you watching from? Let me know in the comments. The call came in at 2:47 a.m. on a Tuesday morning in August 1987. I was Special Agent Michael Sullivan, 3 years into my assignment at the Las Vegas FBI field office, and I'd already learned that the worst calls always came in the dead of night. The desert had a way of hiding things during the day, but at night, secrets had a tendency to crawl out from under rocks. "Sullivan," I answered, my voice rough from sleep. "Mike, it's Tom Bradley." My supervisor's voice was tight, controlled in that way that meant something bad had happened. "We need you at the Stardust." There's been a situation. The Stardust Casino was one of the older establishments on the Strip, its neon facade a throwback to the mob-run glory days of Vegas. By 1987, it was trying to clean up its image, but everyone knew the old connections ran deep. I dressed quickly in the dark, careful not to wake my wife, Jennifer, and drove through the empty streets toward the lights of the Strip. The casino parking lot was cordoned off with yellow tape, and I counted 6 Metro Patrol cars, their lights painting the asphalt in alternating red and blue. Tom Bradley stood near the entrance, his gray suit impeccable despite the hour. Next to him was Detective Ray Martinez from Las Vegas Metro, a veteran cop I'd worked with on several joint operations. "What do we have?" I asked, ducking under the tape. Tom's jaw was tight. Security guard found a body in the counting room. Marcus Thompson, one of the night managers, but that's not why you're here. He paused, glancing around to make sure no one was within earshot. "There's a message, written in blood on the wall. It references our ongoing investigation into the Torino family." The Torino investigation had been my primary focus for the past 18 months. Vincent Torino ran most of the illegal gambling operations that still thrived in the shadows of legitimate Vegas, and we'd been building a RICO case against him and his associates. If someone was sending messages about the investigation, it meant we had a leak, or worse. The counting room was in the basement of the casino, accessed through a maze of service corridors that smelled of stale cigarette smoke and industrial cleaner. 2 crime scene technicians were photographing the scene when we arrived. The smell hit me first, that copper penny scent of blood mixed with something else, something that made my stomach turn. Fear. You could smell fear in a room where someone died badly. Marcus Thompson's body was slumped in a chair at the counting table. He'd been a big man, probably 250 pounds, but death had made him seem smaller. His throat had been cut, a single precise slash that had nearly decapitated him. Blood had pooled on the table, soaking into stacks of $100 bills that would now be evidence. But it was the wall behind him that made my blood run cold. Written in blood, in neat block letters, were the words, "Torino knows about November 15th. This is just the beginning." November 15th was the date we'd planned to execute simultaneous raids on 6 Torino properties. Only 5 people knew that date: myself, Tom Bradley, the U.S. Attorney, and 2 other agents on my team. One of them was either compromised or dirty. "Who found the body?" I asked Ray Martinez. "Security guard named Danny Morrison. He's in the break room, pretty shaken up. Says he was doing his regular rounds when he noticed the counting room door was ajar. Policy is it's always locked unless there's a scheduled count." I looked at the body again, studying the scene. Thompson's hands were unbound. but there were no defensive wounds. He hadn't fought back. Either he knew his killer or he'd been taken by surprise. Time of death? I asked one of the technicians. Based on body temperature and rigor, between midnight and 2 a.m. Tom Bradley pulled me aside. Mike, I need you to handle this personally. If Torino knows about our operation, we need to find the leak fast, and we need to know if Thompson was just a message or if he was involved somehow. I spent the next 3 hours at the Stardust, interviewing staff and reviewing security footage. The casino's surveillance system was state-of-the-art for 1987, with cameras covering every inch of the gaming floor and most of the back areas. But there was a blind spot in the service corridor leading to the counting room, a blind spot that seemed too convenient to be accidental. Danny Morrison, the security guard who found the body, was a nervous man in his 50s with the yellowed fingers of a chain smoker. He sat in the break room, a cup of coffee growing cold in front of him. "I've been working here 15 years, he said, his voice shaky. "Never seen anything like that. The smell. God, the smell." "Tell me about your rounds," I said, keeping my voice calm and professional. "What made you check the counting room?" "I always check it, every 2 hours like clockwork. The door's supposed to be locked, and I check the handle to make sure. But tonight it was open. Not wide open, just ajar, maybe an inch." "Did you see anyone in the corridors? Hear anything unusual?" Danny shook his head. "Nothing." It was quiet. Too quiet, maybe. Usually, you can hear the slots from anywhere in the building. But down there, it was like someone had thrown a blanket over everything. I made a note. The counting room was soundproofed, but Danny was right. You could usually hear some ambient noise from the casino floor. The killer might have disabled some of the ventilation systems to muffle sound. By dawn, I was back at the FBI field office, a squat concrete building that looked out of place among the glitz of Vegas. My team was assembled in the conference room. Special Agents Robert Hutchinson and Frank DeMarco, both solid investigators who'd been with me on the Torino case from the beginning. Tom Bradley sat at the head of the table, his face grim. "Gentlemen," Tom began, "we have a serious problem. Someone leaked the November 15th date to Vincent Torino, and now we have a dead casino manager and a bloody message that suggests more violence is coming. The U.S. Attorney wants to know if we should abort the operation." "We can't abort," Frank said immediately. He was the younger of my two partners, ambitious and sometimes too eager. "We've spent 18 months building this case. If we back down now, Torino wins." Robert, older and more cautious, disagreed. "If Torino knows we're coming, it's already over. He'll have moved any evidence," warned his people. "We'd be walking into empty buildings." I'd been thinking about this during the drive back from the Stardust. "There's another possibility," I said. "What if Torino doesn't actually know the date? What if someone wants us to think he does?" Tom leaned forward. "Explain." "Marcus Thompson had gambling debts, big ones, according to what Ray Martinez told me. He owed money to some people connected to the Torino family, but also to other operators. What if one of Torino's competitors killed Thompson and left that message to make us abort the raids? If we pull back, Torino stays in business, but he also becomes our prime suspect for the murder. It's a win-win for his enemies." The room was quiet as everyone considered this. "It's possible," Tom said finally, "but we can't take the chance. I'm moving the raids up to November 10th. That gives us 5 days to figure out if we have a leak and to determine who killed Marcus Thompson. 5 days. In law enforcement terms, that was nothing, but I'd worked miracles with less time before. I started by diving deep into Marcus Thompson's life. The man was a walking cautionary tale about Vegas. He'd come here in 1975 with dreams of making it big, got a job at the Stardust working the floor, and slowly worked his way up to night manager. But the whole time, he'd been gambling at other casinos, convinced he had a system that could beat the house. By 1987, he owed $340,000 to various creditors, including $75,000 to a loan shark named Joey Benedetto, who worked for the Torino family. Joey Benedetto was a classic Vegas thug. Silk shirts, gold chains, and hands that had broken more bones than I cared to count. I found him at his usual spot, a strip club called the Desert Rose, holding court in a booth near the back. "Agent Sullivan," he said when I approached, not bothering to look up from his drink. "I heard you've been asking about Marcus Thompson." "News travels fast," I said, sliding into the booth across from him. "Were you aware he's dead?" Joey's eyes flickered with something. Surprise? Fear? It was gone too quickly to tell. "I heard." "Shame about that. He owed me money. $75,000, I said. "That's a lot of money to lose." Joey shrugged. "Cost of doing business. Besides, dead men don't pay debts. Why would I kill him?" It was a fair point, but I'd learned long ago that logic didn't always apply in Vegas. "Maybe you wanted to send a message. Maybe Marcus was talking to the wrong people." Joey leaned forward, and for the first time, I saw genuine anger in his eyes. "Let me explain something to you, Fed. If I wanted to send a message, I wouldn't do it in a casino counting room. Too many cameras, too many witnesses. I'd do it in the desert, where the coyotes would scatter the bones before anyone found them. Whoever killed Marcus wanted him found, wanted that message seen. He was right, and I knew it. The murder was too theatrical, too public. This was about more than just a gambling debt. I spent the next 2 days interviewing everyone who'd had contact with Marcus Thompson in the weeks before his death. Casino employees, other gamblers, even the woman who cut his hair. A picture emerged of a desperate man who'd been trying to find a way out of his debts. He'd been asking questions about the FBI investigation, trying to find information he could sell. Then I found Beverly Carlson. Beverly was a cocktail waitress at the Stardust, a pretty blonde in her 30s who'd been working there for 5 years. According to other employees, she and Marcus had been involved romantically, though they'd tried to keep it secret since fraternization between management and staff was against casino policy. I interviewed her at her apartment, a modest one-bedroom in a complex off Flamingo Road. She answered the door in a terry cloth robe, her eyes red from crying. "I told him to stop," she said, sitting on her couch with her arms wrapped around herself. "I told him the gambling would kill him one day." "When did you last see Marcus?" I asked. 2 nights before he died. He came here after his shift. He was excited about something, said he'd found a way to clear his debts and start fresh." "Did he say what it was?" Beverly hesitated, and I could see her weighing how much to tell me. "He said he had information someone would pay for. Information about some big FBI operation. He'd overheard something, or seen something. I told him it was dangerous, that he should just forget about it, but he wouldn't listen." My blood went cold. "Did he say where he got this information?" "No, but he was scared of someone." "Really scared?" He kept looking out the window, checking the parking lot. He said if anything happened to him, I should tell the FBI to look at their own people. Their own people. The words echoed in my mind as I drove back to the field office. If Marcus had somehow obtained information about our November 15th raids, and if he'd been killed for it, then the leak was definitely inside our investigation. That night, I couldn't sleep. I sat in my home office, going over every detail of the case. every person who had access to the information about the raids. Tom Bradley, myself, Robert Hutchinson, Frank DeMarco, and Assistant U.S. Attorney Patricia Morse. 5 people. One of them had either deliberately or inadvertently leaked the information that got Marcus Thompson killed. The phone rang at 3 a.m. I answered it immediately, expecting Tom or one of my team. Instead, I heard a voice I didn't recognize, muffled as if the speaker was covering the mouthpiece with cloth. "Agent Sullivan, you're looking in the wrong place." "Who is this?" Marcus Thompson wasn't killed because of what he knew. He was killed because of what he saw. Check the surveillance footage from August 3rd. Counting room, 11 p.m. The line went dead. August 3rd was 2 weeks before Thompson's death. I drove to the Stardust immediately, using my federal authority to access their surveillance archives. The security chief, a former cop named Bill Dwyer, helped me find the right tapes. "August 3rd, counting room," he muttered, pulling tapes from a filing system. "Here we go. What time frame are you looking for?" 11 p.m., I said. We watched the grainy black and white footage on a small monitor in the security office. At first, it showed nothing unusual. The counting room with its table and chairs, stacks of money being sorted by 2 employees. Then, at 11:07 p.m., Marcus Thompson entered the frame. He appeared to be doing a routine check, but then he stopped, staring at something off camera. "Can you enhance this?" I asked. Bill adjusted some controls, and the image became slightly clearer. Marcus was looking at some papers on the table, documents that had been left out. His body language changed. He became tense, alert. He looked around, then quickly left the room. "What was on those papers?" I asked. Bill shrugged. "No way to tell from this angle, but I can tell you who was in there before Marcus." He rewound the tape. At 10:45 p.m., a figure entered the counting room, carrying a briefcase. The person's face was clearly visible. It was Robert Hutchinson, my partner on the Torino investigation. My mind raced. What was Robert doing in a casino counting room? He had no legitimate reason to be there, especially not at that hour. And whatever papers he'd left behind had clearly startled Marcus Thompson. I needed to be careful. If Robert was dirty, confronting him directly could be dangerous. Instead, I did what any good investigator does. I dug deeper. Robert Hutchinson had been with the FBI for 12 years, with a spotless record. He was married with 2 kids, lived in a suburban house in Henderson, and by all accounts was a model agent. But everyone has secrets, and in Vegas those secrets usually involved money. I quietly pulled Robert's financial records, using my authority as lead agent on the Torino case. What I found made my stomach sink. 3 months ago, Robert had paid off his mortgage in full, a $180,000 payment that didn't match any legitimate source of income. He'd also bought his wife a new Cadillac, paid cash. The money had to come from somewhere. I brought my findings to Tom Bradley, meeting him at his home rather than the office. Tom lived in a modest ranch house in Summerlin, and we sat in his study, surrounded by books on criminal justice and framed commendations. "You're sure about this?" Tom asked after I'd laid out everything. "The surveillance footage doesn't lie. Robert was in that counting room, and whatever Marcus Thompson saw there got him killed." Tom was quiet for a long moment, then picked up his phone. "I'm calling Internal Affairs. They'll want to handle this directly." But before he could dial, his doorbell rang. Tom frowned. It was past 10 p.m., too late for visitors. He went to answer it, and I heard voices in the hallway. Then Tom returned, his face pale. Behind him was Robert Hutchinson, and he was holding a gun. "I'm sorry about this, Mike," Robert said, closing the door behind him. I really am. But I can't let you make that call. Robert, what the hell are you doing? I asked, my hand instinctively moving toward my own weapon. Don't, Robert said, his gun steady. Please, I don't want to hurt anyone else. Anyone else? You killed Marcus Thompson? Robert's face twisted with anguish. I didn't mean to. He was blackmailing me. He saw those papers, documents that showed I'd been taking money from the Torino family. Not to help them, God no. They were paying me to look the other way on some of their smaller operations, the ones that weren't part of our main investigation. How much? Tom asked, his voice cold. $200,000 over 6 months, Robert said. I was drowning, Tom. My daughter needed surgery, special treatments that insurance wouldn't cover. The medical bills were killing us. Torino's people approached me, said it was just small stuff, victimless crimes. I was desperate. There are no victimless crimes in Torino's world, I said. You know that. I know. Robert's hand was shaking now. I know I screwed up, but when Thompson found out, he wanted half of everything I'd taken, plus monthly payments. I went to meet him that night to pay him, but he kept pushing, wanting more. He said he'd not only expose me, but claim I was the one who told him about the November 15th raids. I snapped. I didn't plan it. And the message on the wall? Tom asked. I wrote it to throw you off, make you think Torino was involved. I'm sorry. The three of us stood there in Tom's study, a tableau of betrayal and desperation. I could see Robert wrestling with himself, the gun wavering. Robert, I said softly, you're not a killer. You made a mistake, but don't make it worse. Put the gun down. I can't go to prison, Mike. My family, my kids. Your kids need their father alive, Tom said, even if he's in prison. Don't do this. For a moment, I thought Robert would listen. His arm started to lower. Then we heard sirens in the distance growing closer. Someone, maybe a neighbor, had seen Robert enter with the gun and called the police. Robert's face crumpled. I'm sorry, he said again. Then he put the gun to his own head and pulled the trigger. 3 weeks after Robert Hutchinson's suicide, I was still dealing with the fallout. Internal affairs had torn apart our entire operation, questioning every decision, every piece of evidence we'd gathered against the Torino family. The November 15th raids had been canceled indefinitely. Vincent Torino was probably laughing in his penthouse suite. I was at my desk on a Thursday evening in September, trying to salvage what I could of the case, when Special Agent Lisa Donovan walked in. Lisa had transferred to Vegas from the Phoenix office just days after Robert's death, brought in to help rebuild the team. She was sharp, dedicated, and had a reputation for being incorruptible, exactly what we needed. Sullivan, you need to see this, she said. Dropping a file on my desk, I opened it to find crime scene photos from a house in North Las Vegas. 3 bodies, all young women, all showing signs of severe abuse. But what caught my attention was the symbol carved into each victim's forehead, a triangle with an eye inside it. When was this? I asked. 2 hours ago. Metro called us in because one of the victims had this in her pocket. Lisa handed me an evidence bag containing a business card. It was for a modeling agency called Silver Dreams, with an address on Industrial Road. So, I said, Vegas is full of modeling agencies. Turn it over. On the back of the card, someone had written in pencil, FBI, HELPUS. I looked at the photos again, studying the victims' faces. They were all young, probably late teens or early 20s, and they had the hollow, haunted look I'd seen before in trafficking victims. Metro thinks this is connected to a string of disappearances over the past year, Lisa said. Young women coming to Vegas for modeling or dancing jobs, then vanishing. The families get one phone call saying they're fine, then nothing. I knew the type of case she was describing. Human trafficking was a growing problem in Vegas, with its transient population and culture of secrecy. But the symbol carved into the victim's forehead suggested something more organized, more ritualistic. "Let's go check out this agency," I said, grabbing my jacket. Silver Dreams Modeling Agency occupied the second floor of a strip mall that had seen better days. The windows were covered with silver reflective film, and the door was locked despite a sign saying they were open until 10 p.m. I knocked, identifying myself as FBI. No answer. I knocked again, harder this time. "Federal agents, open up." Still nothing. I was about to call for a warrant when Lisa noticed something, a thin line of blood seeping from under the door. That changed everything. Exigent circumstances allowed us to enter without a warrant if we believed someone inside was in immediate danger. I kicked the door open, and we entered with weapons drawn. The reception area was empty, but showed signs of a struggle. Overturned chairs, papers scattered on the floor, and more blood leading toward a back hallway. We followed the trail, checking each room as we went. In the last office, we found him. A man in his 40s, wearing an expensive suit now soaked in blood. He'd been shot twice in the chest and was barely breathing. "Call an ambulance," I told Lisa, then knelt beside the man. "Sir, can you hear me?" "Who did this to you?" His eyes fluttered open, unfocused. The railroad," he gasped. "They're using the railroad." "What railroad? What are you talking about?" But he was gone, his last breath escaping in a wet rattle. While we waited for the crime scene team, Lisa and I searched the office. We found files on dozens of young women, complete with photographs and personal information. But what really caught my attention was a ledger hidden in a wall safe that had been left open. The ledger contained dates, names, and dollar amounts. It was a trafficking record, showing girls being bought and sold like cattle. But there were also strange notations, references to ceremonies, initiations, and ascending to the next level. "This isn't just trafficking," Lisa said, reading over my shoulder. "This is something else." "Something? Cult-like," I finished. The word hung in the air between us. Cults weren't uncommon in the desert around Vegas. The isolation and heat seemed to attract unstable individuals with delusions of grandeur. But a cult involved in human trafficking was something else entirely. We spent the rest of the night going through the agency's records. By dawn, we'd identified a pattern. The girls were being recruited through seemingly legitimate modeling agencies, then gradually isolated from their families. They were moved through a series of safe houses around Vegas, each move taking them deeper into the organization's control. And then there was the reference to the railroad. Las Vegas had a complicated relationship with railroads. The city had essentially been founded as a railroad town in 1905, and abandoned rail lines crisscrossed the desert around the city. Some were still in use for freight, but many had been abandoned for decades. "What if they're literally using old railroad routes to move the girls?" Lisa suggested. "It would avoid road checkpoints, security cameras." It was possible. I called Tom Bradley, who despite the late hour answered immediately. "We need resources to search the abandoned rail lines around Vegas," I told him, "and we need them fast. If this organization knows we're onto them, they'll move the girls, or worse." Tom authorized a joint task force with Metro PD and Nevada State Police. By noon, we had teams searching every abandoned railroad property within 50 miles of Vegas. It was like looking for a needle in a haystack, but we had one advantage: the symbol from the crime scene. I'd sent photos of the triangle and eye symbol to our behavioral analysis unit at Quantico. They identified it as a variation of the Eye of Providence, often associated with Illuminati conspiracy theories, but also used by various fringe religious groups. One analyst noted that a similar symbol had been found at crime scenes in Arizona and Utah over the past 3 years, suggesting our trafficking ring operated across state lines. The breakthrough came from an unexpected source. Danny Morrison, the security guard from the Stardust who'd found Marcus Thompson's body, called me at the office. "Agent Sullivan, I don't know if this means anything, but I saw that symbol on the news. The one from those murdered girls. What about it?" "I've seen it before. Out in the desert, near the old Kelso Depot. I go metal detecting out there sometimes, and there's this abandoned maintenance shed about a mile from the main depot. Someone painted that symbol on the door. The Kelso Depot was a restored railroad station about 90 miles southwest of Vegas, in the middle of the Mojave Desert. It was a tourist attraction now, but the surrounding area was dotted with abandoned railroad infrastructure from the early 20th century. Lisa and I drove out that afternoon, taking an unmarked car to avoid attention. The desert in September was still brutally hot, the sun beating down on the cracked earth and Joshua trees. We found the maintenance shed Danny had described, a corrugated metal building that looked like it hadn't been used in decades. But the padlock on the door was new, and there were fresh tire tracks in the dirt. We called for backup, but I knew we couldn't wait. If there were girls being held inside, every minute counted. Lisa picked the lock while I covered her, and we entered the shed, weapons drawn. The inside had been converted into a makeshift living space. There were mattresses on the floor, chains bolted to the walls, and the overwhelming smell of human misery. But it was empty, recently empty. Food wrappers and water bottles suggested people had been here within the last day. "They moved them," Lisa said, frustration evident in her voice. But they'd left something behind. In their haste to evacuate, someone had dropped a notebook. It contained what looked like shipping schedules with dates, times, and cryptic location codes. One entry was for that night. Final ceremony, location 7, midnight, 12 ascending. "Location 7, I muttered, trying to decode it. Then it hit me. Railroad mile markers. The old Vegas line had numbered stops every 7 miles. Location 7 would be... I pulled out a map of the old railroad routes. Mile marker 7 on the abandoned Las Vegas and Tonopah Railroad would put us at an old mining camp called Good Springs, about 30 miles southwest of the city. We had 6 hours until midnight. Tom Bradley mobilized every available agent. We couldn't go in blind. If this was indeed a final ceremony, it might be our only chance to save the 12 girls mentioned in the notebook. But we also couldn't spook them into killing the victims. The plan was to approach on foot from multiple directions, using night vision equipment to navigate the desert. Lisa and I would lead one team, approaching from the north. We'd have sniper support and a helicopter on standby, but the initial approach had to be silent. Good Springs was a ghost town that had seen better days during the mining boom. A few stubborn residents still lived there, but the outlying areas were abandoned. The location we'd identified was an old processing plant, its wooden structures bleached white by decades of desert sun. As we approached through the darkness, I could see lights inside the main building. Candles or lanterns, giving everything an eerie glow. Through night vision, I counted at least 20 people moving around outside, all wearing what looked like robes. "This is definitely a cult," Lisa whispered. We waited until 11:45, then began our approach. The desert was silent except for the occasional call of a coyote. My heart was pounding as we reached the perimeter of the compound. Through a gap in the wall, I could see inside the main building. 12 young women, all in white gowns, were arranged in a circle. They appeared drugged, swaying slightly but unable to stand without support. In the center of the circle was a man I recognized from the Silver Dreams files, Richard Kelway, the agency's owner who was supposedly out of town on business. Kelway was wearing elaborate robes and holding what looked like a ceremonial knife. He was speaking, but I couldn't make out the words from our distance. What I could see was that he was working himself into a frenzy, and the knife was getting closer to the nearest girl. I made the call. All teams move in now. What happened next was controlled chaos. FBI agents and police officers swarmed the compound from all directions, shouting commands and firing flashbang grenades to disorient the cultists. Some tried to run into the desert, but were quickly caught. Others dropped to their knees in surrender. Kelway, however, didn't run. As I entered the building, I saw him grab one of the girls, holding the knife to her throat. "Stay back," he screamed. "You don't understand. They've been chosen. They're ascending to a higher plane." "Let her go, Kelway," I said, my weapon trained on him. "It's over." "No, you've ruined everything. Years of preparation, of purification." His eyes were wild, unfocused. This wasn't just a trafficking ring. Kelway genuinely believed in whatever twisted mythology he'd created. Lisa circled around to his left, trying to get a clear shot. But Kelway saw her and pressed the knife harder against the girl's throat, drawing a thin line of blood. "I'll kill her. I'll kill them all before I let you take them back to their mundane lives." The girl in his arms was barely conscious, but I saw her eyes focus for a moment. She looked right at me, and in that look was a plea, not just to save her, but to end this nightmare for all of them. I made a decision that went against all my training. I lowered my weapon. "Okay," I said, "you win. Tell me about the ascension. Help me understand." Kelway's grip loosened slightly. You want to know?" "Yes. You've clearly discovered something important. These girls are special, aren't they?" As Kelway began to ramble about spiritual purity and transcendence, I saw Lisa moving into position. I kept Kelway talking, letting him explain his delusions about saving these girls from a corrupt world by purifying them through suffering. It was all the distraction Lisa needed. Her shot was perfect. The bullet caught Kelway in the shoulder, spinning him away from the girl. I rushed forward, kicking the knife away and restraining him as he screamed about prophecies and divine missions. The 12 girls were all alive, though severely traumatized and malnourished. They'd been held for weeks, subjected to psychological torture designed to break their will. But they were survivors, and with proper care they'd have a chance at recovery. As the scene was processed and the cultists were arrested, I found myself standing outside the compound looking at the stars. The desert had swallowed so many secrets over the years, but tonight we'd dragged some of them into the light. Lisa joined me, looking exhausted but satisfied. "Good work in there. The talking, I mean. You probably saved that girl's life." "We all did," I said, "but this isn't over." Kelway had help, resources. Someone was funding this operation. She nodded. "The financial records from Silver Dreams show large cash deposits from untraceable sources. Someone wanted these girls for something more than just Kelway's cult fantasies." I thought about the triangle and eye symbol, about the references to ceremonies in multiple states. We'd stopped one operation, but I had a feeling we'd only scratched the surface of something much larger. As we drove back to Vegas, the lights of the city glowing on the horizon, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were being watched. The desert might give up some secrets, but it always kept others, buried deep in the sand and darkness. October 1987 brought an unusual chill to Las Vegas. the kind that made the neon lights seem sharper against the night sky. I'd been working 18-hour days since the Goodsprings raid, following financial threads from Richard Kelway's trafficking ring. Every lead seemed to disappear into offshore accounts and shell companies, a labyrinth of money that someone had carefully constructed to hide their involvement. It was a Friday night when everything changed. I was alone in the office, surrounded by financial records and empty coffee cups, when the phone rang. The caller ID showed a blocked number. "Sullivan," I answered. There was a pause, then a woman's voice, distorted by what sounded like electronic manipulation. "Agent Sullivan, you need to stop looking into the Kelway finances." "Who is this?" "Someone who knows what happens to federal agents who dig too deep in this city." Robert Hutchinson wasn't the first, and he won't be the last. The mention of Robert made my blood run cold. "If you have information about tomorrow night, the Neon Museum Boneyard, 3 a.m., come alone or don't come at all." The line went dead. The Neon Museum, also known as the Neon Boneyard, was where old casino signs went to die. Acres of disconnected letters and burnt-out bulbs, the glowing promises of yesterday's Vegas slowly rusting in the desert air. It wouldn't officially open to the public for years yet, but it existed as a storage facility for the city's discarded dreams. I should have reported the call to Tom Bradley, should have arranged for backup. But something in the caller's voice, a note of genuine fear beneath the distortion, made me hesitate. And the reference to Robert suggested this was connected to more than just the trafficking ring. I spent Saturday researching, pulling files on federal agents who died or disappeared in Vegas over the past decade. The official records showed nothing unusual. A heart attack here, a car accident there, one suicide before Robert's. But when I looked closer, I found patterns. Each agent had been investigating organized crime connections to legitimate Vegas businesses. Each had died just as their investigations were gaining traction. That night, I armed myself with my service weapon and a backup .38 revolver, then drove to the Neon Boneyard. The entrance was chained shut, but there was a section of fence that had been cut and poorly repaired, a passage for urban explorers and vandals. I slipped through, my flashlight cutting through the darkness. The Boneyard was eerily beautiful at night. Giant letters from the Stardust, the Moulin Rouge, and dozens of other casinos lay scattered like the bones of neon dinosaurs. My footsteps echoed off the metal and glass, creating a symphony of small sounds that made it impossible to tell if I was alone. At exactly 3 a.m., a figure emerged from behind the massive Silver Slipper from the Silver Slipper Casino. It was a woman in her 40s, wearing a maintenance worker's uniform. Her face was gaunt, marked by stress and sleepless nights. I recognized her from somewhere but couldn't place it. "No gun," she said, raising her hands to show she was unarmed. "I'm not here to hurt you." "Who are you?" "My name is Diane Morse. I was Patricia Morse's sister. Patricia Morse, the assistant U.S. attorney who'd been working the Torino case with us. She died in a car accident 6 months ago, her vehicle going off a cliff on Mount Charleston. It had been ruled an accident, but now—" "That wasn't an accident, was it?" I asked. Diane shook her head. "Patricia called me the night she died. She said she'd discovered something, evidence of a conspiracy that went all the way to the top of Nevada politics. She was going to meet someone who promised more information. 2 hours later, she was dead. Why didn't you come forward?" "With what?" "Suspicions? Besides, I knew what happened to people who asked too many questions. But then you stopped that trafficking ring, and I thought maybe you were different. Maybe you could finish what Patricia started." She pulled out a small key from her pocket. "Patricia left this in my mailbox the day she died. It's for a storage unit in Henderson. Unit 447 at Desert Storage. She said, if anything happened to her, I should wait 6 months, then find someone I could trust. I took the key, its metal cold in my palm. Why trust me? Because you're already marked, Diane said. They know you've been looking into the money. The same people who killed Patricia, who drove Robert Hutchinson to suicide, who've been running this city from the shadows for decades. You're already dead, Agent Sullivan. You just don't know it yet. Before I could respond, a spotlight blazed to life, blinding us both. I heard car engines, multiple vehicles surrounding the boneyard. Through the glare, I could make out figures in tactical gear moving through the neon graveyard. "Run!" Diane shouted, but it was too late. The first shot caught her in the chest, spinning her around. She fell against the silver slipper, blood spreading across the reflective surface. I drew my weapon, firing at the muzzle flashes while trying to find cover. The neon signs provided plenty of concealment, but little real protection. Bullets sparked off metal, shattered old bulbs, sent decades-old glass raining down like deadly snow. I counted at least 6 shooters, all with automatic weapons, all moving with military precision. This wasn't a gang hit or mob enforcement. This was an execution squad. I managed to reach an old delivery truck, its sides emblazoned with the defunct Dunes Casino logo. My ammunition was running low. I'd already gone through my primary weapons magazine and was down to my backup revolver. The tactical team was closing in, their movements coordinated through radio communications I could hear but not understand. That's when I heard the sirens, multiple units coming fast. Someone had called in the shooting. The tactical team heard them too, and their leader barked an order to withdraw. Within seconds they were gone, disappearing into vehicles that peeled away into the night. I rushed to Diane, but she was already gone. In her hand, clutched so tightly I had to pry her fingers open, was a photograph. It showed Patricia Morse with several other people at what looked like a charity gala. I recognized some faces, local politicians, casino executives, and in the background, partially hidden behind another person, was someone I knew very well. Tom Bradley, my supervisor. The responding officers were Metro PD, led by Detective Ray Martinez. He looked at the scene, Diane's body, the bullet casings, the destroyed neon signs, and shook his head. "Mike, what the hell happened here?" I had a split second to decide how much to tell him. If Tom was involved in this conspiracy, then reporting through the official channels would be signing my own death warrant. But I needed help, and Ray had always been straight with me. "I got a tip about the trafficking case," I said, which was partially true. The informant was killed before she could tell me everything. The shooters were professional, military trained. Ray studied me, and I could see him processing the half-truths. "This is connected to something bigger, isn't it?" I nodded. "Ray, I need you to process this scene by the book, but I also need you to lose my name from the initial report. Can you give me 24 hours before filing the complete paperwork?" It was a huge ask, potentially career-ending for him. But Ray had been a cop in Vegas for 20 years. He knew how the city worked, knew that sometimes the system itself was the enemy. 24 hours, he said. "But Mike, whatever you're into, be careful. This city has a way of swallowing people whole." I left the scene before the FBI response team arrived, driving aimlessly through the pre-dawn streets while I tried to process what I'd learned. If Tom Bradley was part of this conspiracy, then every move I'd made had been monitored, every investigation potentially compromised. But I couldn't be sure based on one photograph. I needed more evidence. The storage unit key felt like it was burning a hole in my pocket. Desert Storage was a sprawling complex of climate-controlled units on the outskirts of Henderson. I arrived just as they opened at 6 a.m., using a fake name to gain access. Unit 447 was in the back corner, far from the security cameras. Inside, Patricia Morse had left a treasure trove of evidence. Boxes of documents, photographs, audio recordings, and computer disks. She'd been investigating a shadow organization she called the Commission, a group of powerful individuals who controlled much of Vegas's illegal and legal operations. They had judges, police commissioners, FBI agents, and politicians in their pocket. One file contained financial records showing regular payments from casino counting rooms to offshore accounts, then redistributed to various law enforcement officials. The amounts were staggering, millions of dollars a month in bribes and payoffs. Robert Hutchinson's name was there, but so were dozens of others, including 3 current FBI agents in the Las Vegas field office. But the most damning evidence was a series of photographs from a meeting at a ranch outside the city. The images were dated 1 week before Patricia's death. They showed Tom Bradley meeting with Vincent Torino and several other crime figures. In one photo, Tom was clearly accepting an envelope from Torino. My supervisor, the man who'd been leading our investigation into organized crime, was on their payroll. I spent hours in that storage unit, documenting everything with a camera I'd bought from a pawn shop. I couldn't take the original documents. They'd be needed for prosecution, but I needed copies for insurance. As I worked, I found Patricia's journal, her handwritten notes about the investigation. One entry stood out. They call it the Neon Graveyard Protocol. When someone becomes too much of a problem, they're eliminated and replaced with someone more cooperative. It's happened to journalists, prosecutors, federal agents. They stage accidents, suicides, random violence. The city absorbs the deaths, and nobody asks questions because in Vegas people disappear all the time. The Neon Graveyard Protocol. That's what I'd walked into last night. If not for the sirens, I'd be another casualty, another federal agent who'd had an unfortunate accident in the line of duty. I heard vehicles outside the storage unit. Multiple engines, doors slamming. They'd found me. I grabbed the most crucial pieces of evidence, the photos of Tom with Torino, financial records showing the money trail, and Patricia's journal, and stuffed them into a bag. Then I pulled out my service weapon and waited. "Agent Sullivan," Tom Bradley's voice called out, "we know you're in there. Come out and we can talk about this." "How many people have you killed, Tom?" I called back. There was a pause. "I haven't killed anyone, Mike. I'm just a facilitator. I help keep the peace between the various interests in this city. Sometimes that requires difficult decisions. Like murdering Patricia Morse? Patricia didn't understand the delicate balance we maintain here. Vegas runs on vice, Mike. Gambling, prostitution, drugs, they're going to exist whether we fight them or not. The Commission just ensures that the profits are distributed in a way that keeps the violence to a minimum. And the human trafficking, the cult murders, that's keeping the peace? Kelway was a rogue element. We were going to deal with him ourselves, but you got there first. You did us a favor, actually. I could hear them moving outside, taking positions. Tom was just keeping me talking while they surrounded the unit. How much did they pay you to betray your oath, Tom? It's not about money. His composure cracked slightly. It's about reality. You can't stop what Vegas is. You can either work with it or be crushed by it. I tried to protect you, Mike. I kept you focused on the small players, the ones the Commission wanted removed anyway, but you just couldn't leave it alone. I made my decision. There was a ventilation grate in the back of the unit, too small for escape but large enough to push the bag of evidence through. On the other side was another unit, and if I was lucky I could buy enough time for the evidence to be found later. "I'm coming out," I called, pushing the bag through the grate. "Don't shoot." I opened the storage unit door, hands raised, gun left behind. Tom stood there with 6 men in tactical gear. Not FBI, probably private military contractors, the same ones from the Neon Boneyard. "I'm disappointed, Mike," Tom said. "You were a good agent. This didn't have to happen." "Yes, it did," I replied. "The moment you took their money, this became inevitable." Tom nodded to one of the contractors who stepped forward with zip-tie restraints. As he reached for my wrists, I heard sirens in the distance. Multiple units coming fast. Tom's face went pale. "That's impossible. We have everyone covered." But I smiled. Because while I'd been in the storage unit, I'd done something Patricia hadn't. I'd called the one person in Vegas who couldn't be bought. Lisa Donovan, the new agent from Phoenix, who had no connections to the old power structure. I'd sent her everything from my camera before they arrived. "You missed one, Tom." "The new girl. She's probably leading a federal task force here right now, with warrants for everyone involved in the commission." The contractors looked at Tom, waiting for orders. He stood there, calculating odds, probably wondering if he could eliminate me and escape before the units arrived. The sirens were getting closer. "Sir?" one of the contractors asked. Tom pulled out his service weapon. For a moment, I thought he was going to shoot me himself. Instead, he put it to his own temple. "I'm not going to prison," he said simply. "Tom, don't..." The gunshot echoed through the storage facility. Tom Bradley fell to the ground, his blood spreading across the concrete. The contractors immediately scattered, professional enough to know when an operation had gone bad. Within seconds, I was alone with Tom's body. The FBI task force arrived 3 minutes later, led by Lisa Donovan and a deputy director from the Los Angeles office. They found me sitting on the ground next to Tom, covered in his blood from where I'd tried to stop the bleeding. The next 72 hours were a blur of debriefings, interrogations, and revelations. The evidence Patricia Morse had gathered, combined with what we found in Tom's own files, exposed a corruption network that reached into every level of the Nevada government. 47 people were arrested, including judges, police officials, and casino executives. Vincent Torino fled the country but was eventually caught in Costa Rica. The commission, as Patricia had called it, was dismantled piece by piece. But I knew that nature abhors a vacuum, especially in Vegas. New players would eventually emerge. New corruptions would take root. The city itself was built on vice and secrets, and that wouldn't change just because we'd exposed one conspiracy. I testified in dozens of trials over the next year, helping to convict most of the conspirators. Some made deals, providing information about other criminal networks in exchange for reduced sentences. The full scope of the Commission's activities was staggering. They'd controlled or influenced nearly every major criminal enterprise in Nevada for over a decade. But the trials also revealed something else. The human trafficking ring that Richard Kelway had run was just one of several operations the Commission had allowed to operate, taking a percentage of profits in exchange for protection. The triangle and eye symbol we'd found wasn't just Kelway's cult signature. It was a mark used by the Commission to identify protected operations. We found similar symbols at crime scenes going back years, cases that had been mysteriously shelved or investigators who'd been redirected. Each mark represented lives destroyed. People disappeared into the shadow economy of Vegas. One name kept coming up in testimony, someone called the Architect, the original founder of the Commission who'd designed its structure to be resilient even if parts were exposed. Nobody knew his real identity, and those who might have known were either dead or too frightened to speak. On my last day in Vegas before my transfer to the Washington, D.C. office, I returned to the Neon Boneyard. It was still a crime scene, technically, but the tape had been removed and the city was preparing to turn it into a proper museum. I stood where Diane Morse had died, looking at the old casino signs. Detective Ray Martinez found me there. He'd been promoted to captain after helping expose several corrupt officers in his department. "Heading out?" he asked. "Tomorrow morning. Had to see it one more time." Ray nodded, understanding. "You did good work here, Mike. Saved a lot of lives. Lost a lot, too. That's the job." He paused, then added, "There's something you should know." We found something in Tom Bradley's house during the evidence search. A list of names, federal agents marked for retirement by the commission. Your name was on it, scheduled for next month. I wasn't surprised. The Neon Graveyard Protocol. Yeah, Diane Morse saved your life by calling you when she did. If you hadn't exposed everything that night, you would have had an accident within weeks. We stood in silence, surrounded by the dead neon of old Vegas. The city had almost killed me, had killed friends and colleagues, had swallowed countless innocent lives in its hunger for profit and power. But we'd fought back, had dragged some of its secrets into the light. "What do you think happens now?" Ray asked. "Vegas goes on," I said. "It always does. New casinos, new crimes, new conspirators. But maybe they'll be a little more careful, a little more afraid. Maybe that's the best we can hope for." As I left the boneyard, I took one last look at the twisted metal and broken glass. Every dead sign had once promised fortune, excitement, dreams come true. But behind the neon had always been darkness. And in that darkness, predators had thrived. The FBI would continue to investigate, continue to fight the endless battle against corruption and crime. Other agents would take my place, young and idealistic, not yet understanding that in Vegas, the house always wins. It just depends on who's running the house. My phone rang as I reached my car. It was Lisa Donovan. "Mike, we just got intel that someone matching the architect's description was spotted in Reno. The director wants to know if you're interested in leading a new task force." I thought about saying no, about walking away from it all. But then I remembered Patricia Morse, Robert Hutchinson, Diane Morse, and all the victims whose names I'd never know. "I'm interested," I said, "because the work never really ends. The darkness just moves, finds new shadows to hide in, new neon to hide behind, and someone has to follow it, has to keep fighting, even when the cost is measured in blood and broken lives." As I drove away from Vegas, the city's lights fading in my rearview mirror, I knew I'd be back. The desert never gives up all its secrets, and Vegas never stops hungry for fresh souls to consume. But now it knew that someone was watching, someone who'd survived its worst and lived to tell the tale. The war between light and darkness in Vegas would continue, fought in counting rooms and courtrooms, in desert graves and neon graveyards. I'd won this battle, but the war itself was eternal, as permanent as the desert sun and as corrupting as easy money. And somewhere out there, the architect was still building, still planning, still weaving new webs of corruption and control. But now I knew what to look for, knew the patterns and the players. The hunt would continue. It had to. Because in Vegas, the only thing more dangerous than the criminals are the ones who are supposed to stop them. And someone has to watch the watchers, even if it means becoming a ghost in the machine, a shadow hunting shadows in a city built on illusion. The desert stretched out for me, endless and unforgiving, hiding its secrets beneath the sand. But secrets have a way of surfacing, especially in Vegas, and I'd be there when they did, ready to drag them into the light no matter the cost. Because that's what we do. We hunt monsters in the neon wilderness, knowing that the brightest lights cast the darkest shadows, and in those shadows, evil thrives. But so does justice sometimes, and sometimes that's enough to keep fighting. My name is Special Agent David Carpenter, and in the summer of 1989, I learned that some cases don't just test your investigative skills, they test your sanity. I'd been with the Las Vegas FBI field office for 6 years, long enough to think I'd seen everything the city had to offer. Long enough to be wrong. It started with a missing persons case that should have been routine. On June 15th, a casino pit boss named William Foster didn't show up for his shift at the Flamingo. His wife called it in after 48 hours, which in Vegas meant he could have been anywhere, drunk in a motel, dead in the desert, or starting a new life in Mexico. But William Foster wasn't the type to run. He had a mortgage, 2 kids in college, and 20 years until retirement. I was assigned the case along with Special Agent Janet Rodriguez, a transfer from the Miami office who'd quickly earned a reputation for being thorough to the point of obsession. We started at Foster's house, a modest 2-story in Spring Valley that screamed middle-class stability. No signs of struggle, Janet noted, examining the front door. No forced entry. Neighbors didn't hear anything unusual. Foster's wife, Margaret, was a nervous woman in her 50s who kept wringing her hands as we questioned her. Bill always called if he was going to be late. Always. In 23 years of marriage, he never once didn't call. Was he having any problems? I asked. Gambling debts, issues at work. She shook her head vigorously. Bill didn't gamble. I know that sounds impossible in this city, but he saw what it did to people every day. He wouldn't even buy lottery tickets. We checked Foster's office at the Flamingo. His desk was organized, almost obsessively so. Schedules, employee evaluations, and incident reports all filed with military precision. His supervisor, Tony Castellano, seemed genuinely concerned. Bill's the most reliable guy I've got, Tony said. Been here 18 years, never missed a shift without calling. Something's wrong. The security footage told us more. William Foster had left the casino at 2:47 a.m. on June 15th, walking to his car in the employee parking structure. The cameras showed him getting into his 1985 Buick LeSabre and driving away. The next camera that should have caught him, at the parking structure exit, showed nothing. His car never left the garage. That's impossible, Janet said, rewinding the footage. There's only one exit. We went back to the parking structure with the security team. Level 3, Section D, where Foster had parked, was unremarkable. No signs of struggle, no oil stains, nothing to indicate anything unusual had happened. But as we were leaving, I noticed something. A small pile of sand in the corner, perfectly circular, about 3 feet in diameter. "Maintenance leave this?" I asked the security chief. He frowned. "No construction going on, no reason for sand to be here." I took a sample, more out of thoroughness than suspicion. It would turn out to be the first piece of a puzzle that would consume the next 6 months of my life. 2 days later, another person vanished. Rebecca Young, a cocktail waitress at the Desert Inn, left her shift at 3:15 a.m. and never made it home. Same pattern, seen getting into her car on security footage, never seen leaving. And in her parking spot, we found another pile of sand. "This is deliberate," Janet said, testing the sand with a field kit. "Someone's leaving these as, what, signatures?" The sand was unusual, incredibly fine, almost like powder, with traces of minerals that suggested it came from deep desert, not the surface sand around Vegas. Our geology consultant at UNLV identified it as specific to a region about 60 miles northwest of the city, near the Nevada test site. By the end of June, we had 7 missing persons, all casino employees who worked late shifts, all vanished from parking structures, all leaving behind those distinctive sand piles. The media had started calling the perpetrator the Sandman, and the pressure from Washington was mounting. Tom Garrett, who'd taken over as field office director after Tom Bradley's death, called us into his office on July 1st. He was a by-the-book bureaucrat from D.C. who didn't understand Vegas and didn't want to. "The director wants results," he said, not looking up from his files. 7 citizens disappeared without a trace. The casinos are pressuring the mayor's pressuring the governor, and everyone's pressuring us. "What do you have?" "A pattern," I said. All victims worked casino floors, all disappeared between 2 and 4 a.m., all from parking structures with security camera blind spots that shouldn't exist. "Inside job." "Has to be," Janet added. "Someone with access to security systems, knowledge of casino operations, and the ability to move freely in restricted areas." Garrett finally looked up. "Then find them. I'm giving you carte blanche. Any resources you need, but I want results by the end of the month." We pulled security personnel files from every casino where a victim had worked. The overlap was minimal, but we found one name that appeared tangentially in connection to several locations: Dennis Powell, a freelance security consultant who'd done camera installation and maintenance work at 5 of the 7 casinos. Powell lived in a rundown apartment complex near downtown, the kind of place where nobody asked questions and rent was paid in cash. When we knocked on his door at 8 a.m. on July 5th, the smell hit us immediately: decomposition. Powell had been dead for at least 2 weeks, his body slumped in a chair, facing a wall covered with photographs. Not family photos or vacation snapshots, but surveillance-style images of our missing persons. Each photo was labeled with a date, time, and a single word: collected. "Jesus," Janet breathed, studying the wall. He was stalking them. But something was off. Powell was a small man, maybe 140 pounds soaking wet. Several of our missing persons were significantly larger. There was no way he could have physically overpowered them, especially William Foster, who'd been a Marine before becoming a pit boss. We processed the apartment, finding detailed notes about each victim's routine, their schedules, their weaknesses. But we also found something else: references to the client and payments of $10,000 per collection. Powell had been a procurer, not the kidnapper. The financial trail led to a shell company called Mojave Holdings, which owned several properties in the desert, including an abandoned mining operation near the location where our sand samples originated. We got a warrant and assembled a tactical team for a raid. The convoy of FBI vehicles drove through the pre-dawn darkness on July 8th, heading northwest on US 95. The old mining site was 63 miles from Vegas, accessible only by a dirt road that hadn't been maintained in decades. As we approached, our headlights illuminated structures that looked wrong somehow. Too new, too clean for an abandoned mine. The main building was a corrugated steel warehouse that had been recently reinforced. No windows, one entrance, and fresh tire tracks in the sand. We positioned ourselves, and on my signal, the tactical team breached the door. What we found inside defied explanation at first. The warehouse had been converted into some kind of medical facility. Hospital beds lined one wall, each with restraints. IV stands, monitoring equipment, and surgical tools were arranged with clinical precision. But the beds were empty, and a thick layer of that distinctive sand covered everything. "Clear!" the tactical team leader called out, but I was focused on something else. In the corner of the facility was a descended staircase leading underground. The walls were concrete, recently poured, and the stairs went down at least 3 stories. "We need to go down," I told Janet. She nodded, and we descended with 4 tactical officers, our flashlights cutting through the darkness. The temperature dropped with each level, and the air became thick, almost suffocating. At the bottom, we found a metal door with a small window. Through the window, I saw them. Our 7 missing persons were lying on gurneys in a room that looked like a cross between an operating theater and a morgue. They were unconscious, connected to machines that monitored their vitals, IVS feeding unknown substances into their veins. But what made my blood run cold was what was happening to their bodies. Sand was growing from their skin, not on it, but from it, emerging from their pores like some horrific crystallization. William Foster was the worst. His entire left arm had been transformed into that fine, powdery sand, held in the shape of an arm only by some kind of mesh sleeve. "What the hell is this?" Janet whispered. Before I could answer, we heard footsteps behind us. A man in a lab coat stood at the top of the stairs, his hands raised. He was thin, academic-looking, with thick glasses and the kind of pallor that came from spending too much time underground. "Please, don't shoot," he said calmly. "My name is Dr. Harold Kemp. I'm a researcher. I can explain everything." We arrested him, secured the scene, and called for medical evacuation for the victims. But as the paramedics tried to move William Foster, his transformed arm crumbled, the sand scattering across the floor. He screamed, a sound I'll never forget, and we realized that whatever had been done to these people might not be reversible. Dr. Kemp was surprisingly cooperative during interrogation. He sat in our interview room, sipping water and speaking in the measured tones of someone giving an academic lecture. "It started as legitimate research," he said. "I was working on silicon-based organisms for NASA, studying how life might exist in extreme environments. But the funding was cut in '85 and I had to find private investors." "Who?" I demanded. "People who saw the potential for what I was creating. Do you understand what this means? The ability to transform organic matter into silicon-based structures. It could revolutionize everything from medicine to construction." "You were experimenting on people," Janet said, her voice tight with controlled anger. Kemp adjusted his glasses. The subjects were carefully chosen. People who wouldn't be missed immediately, whose disappearances could be explained by Las Vegas's transient nature. Mr. Powell identified them, and my employers provided the resources. "Who are your employers?" For the first time, Kemp looked uncomfortable. "I don't know their real names. They communicated through intermediaries, paid in cash, and were very clear about what would happen if I tried to identify them." We pressed him for hours, but he insisted he didn't know who was funding the research. The shell company trail went cold at offshore accounts, and the few phone numbers we found were all disconnected burners. Meanwhile, the 7 victims were at the University Medical Center, where doctors were trying to understand what had been done to them. The transformation was unlike anything in medical literature. Their bodies were slowly converting from carbon-based to silicon-based at the cellular level. The process was excruciating and, according to every specialist consulted, irreversible. William Foster died on July 10th. His body had converted nearly 60% to sand by the time his heart, unable to pump the increasingly crystallized blood, simply stopped. The others followed over the next week, each death more horrible than the last. Rebecca Young was the last to go, conscious until the end, begging us to tell her children she loved them as her vocal cords turned to sand. The investigation continued, but every lead dead-ended. Dr. Kemp was convicted of 7 counts of murder and sentenced to life in prison, but he never revealed who had funded his research. The warehouse in the desert was dismantled, the underground laboratory filled with concrete, and the entire site was declared a federal crime scene, off limits to civilians. But that wasn't the end. 3 months after the Sandman case closed, I thought I'd seen the worst Vegas had to offer. I was wrong. In October 1989, A new horror emerged from the neon-lit depths of the Strip, one that would make me question everything I thought I knew about organized crime in Nevada. It started with a suicide at the Riviera. A high roller named James Morrison had thrown himself from his penthouse suite, 30 floors, straight down onto the valet parking area. The hotel wanted it cleaned up quickly, bad for business, but something about the scene nagged at Detective Ray Martinez, who called me in. "Look at this," Ray said, showing me a photo from Morrison's suite. Written on the bathroom mirror in what appeared to be blood were the words, "The house always wins eternal." "Gambling debt?" I asked. That's what I thought, but Morrison was up $2 million this week, had another $5 million in his accounts. No debts, no enemies, no reason to jump. I went to the suite myself. It was a high-roller comp room, all marble and gold fixtures, the kind of place that cost more per night than most people made in a month. Morrison's belongings were still there. Expensive watches, tailored suits, a briefcase containing stock certificates. But on the bedside table was something odd. A casino chip I'd never seen before. The chip was black, heavier than standard, with an intricate design that seemed to shift in the light. Instead of a casino name, it bore only a symbol, a pyramid with an eye at its apex, surrounded by 13 stars. "Ever seen this before?" I asked Ray. He shook his head. "And I know every chip from every casino in this city." I pocketed the chip as evidence. That decision would later save my life. 2 nights later, another suicide. This time, a dealer from Caesar's Palace named Carol Winters had walked into the desert and shot herself. She'd left a note. "I saw the eternal game. The house always wins." Same phrase. And in her apartment we found another of those strange black chips. Janet and I started investigating connections between Morrison and Winters. On the surface, they had nothing in common. Different casinos, different social circles, different economic brackets. But diving deeper, we found they'd both attended a private poker game 2 weeks before their deaths, hosted at a mansion in Spanish Hills by someone calling themselves the Prophet. The mansion was owned by Celestial Holdings, LLC, another shell company with no traceable ownership. But unlike our previous dead ends, this one was still active. The property was maintained, utilities paid, and according to neighbors, hosted regular gatherings every Wednesday night. High-end vehicles, one neighbor told us. Lamborghinis, Ferraris, Rolls-Royces, but also regular cars, even some beaters. Weird mix of people going in there. Wednesday was 2 days away. Janet and I decided to surveillance the gathering, see what we were dealing with before making any official moves. We set up in a van with tinted windows, parked with a clear view of the mansion's entrance. By 10 p.m., cars began arriving. The neighbor hadn't exaggerated. Everything from a Bentley to a rusted Honda Civic. The people getting out were equally diverse. Obvious high rollers in $1,000 suits, working-class folks in jeans and T-shirts, even what looked like a few homeless individuals. "What the hell brings these people together?" Janet muttered. At exactly midnight, the front door opened, and a figure emerged. Even from a distance, something about him was wrong. He was tall, impossibly thin, wearing what looked like a vintage dealer's outfit from the 1950s. But it was his movement that set off every alarm in my head. Too smooth, too precise, like he was gliding rather than walking. He raised his arms and all the gathered people formed a line, following him into the house. "We need to get closer," I said. We slipped out of the van and approached the mansion from the side, where tall hedges provided cover. Through a gap in the curtains of a ground-floor window, we could see into what had been converted into a private casino. Not just any casino. The entire room was designed to look like an exact replica of an old Vegas establishment. complete with vintage slot machines and gaming tables. The thin man stood at the central poker table, dealing cards with mechanical precision. The diverse group of attendees sat around various tables, but they weren't gambling with money. They were gambling with those black chips, and the stakes seemed to be something far more valuable. I watched as a middle-aged woman lost a hand and pushed her stack of black chips forward. The thin man collected them, and the woman's face went blank. She stood, walked to a side door, and didn't come back. "We need to get in there," Janet whispered. But before we could move, someone grabbed my shoulder. I spun, hand going to my weapon, but stopped when I saw who it was. Dennis Powell, the security consultant who'd procured victims for Dr. Kemp, who we'd found dead in his apartment 3 months ago. He was standing right there, alive, but wrong. His skin had a grayish tint, and his eyes were filmed over like a corpse's. "You shouldn't be here, Agent Carpenter," he said, his voice flat and emotionless. "The game isn't for you." Janet had her weapon out, pointed at Powell. "You're supposed to be dead." "Death is negotiable in Vegas," Powell replied. "Everything has a price. The Prophet offers a different kind of game, one where you can win back what you've lost. But the house always wins eternal." More figures emerged from the shadows. All people I recognized from missing persons files, from death certificates, from cases that had gone cold. They surrounded us, not threatening but insistent, herding us toward the mansion's entrance. "Come," Powell said. "The Prophet wants to meet you." We had no choice. Outnumbered and surrounded by people who shouldn't exist, we allowed ourselves to be led inside. The interior of the mansion was even more unsettling up close. The casino equipment wasn't just vintage, it was impossibly pristine, as if it had been frozen in time from Vegas's golden age. The air smelled of old cigarettes and older secrets. The gamblers didn't look up as we passed, their attention completely focused on their games. The Prophet waited in a private room behind the main floor. Up close, his wrongness was even more apparent. His face was too smooth, like wax, and his eyes were solid black. No whites, no iris, just bottomless dark. "Agents Carpenter and Rodriguez," he said, his voice carrying despite being barely above a whisper. "I've been expecting federal attention eventually. Please, sit." 2 chairs appeared. I swear they weren't there a second before, and we sat, guns still drawn, but feeling increasingly useless. "What is this place?" I demanded. "A second chance," the Prophet replied. "Las Vegas sells dreams, but I sell something better. The opportunity to undo mistakes, to win back losses, to change fate itself. Every person here has lost something precious. I offer them the chance to win it back. The people who killed themselves chose to leave the game," he interrupted. "They saw what the ultimate stakes were and decided they couldn't pay. That's always been the risk in Vegas, betting more than you can afford to lose." "You're killing people," Janet said flatly. The Prophet tilted his head. "Am I?" Mr. Morrison threw himself from a building. Ms. Winters shot herself in the desert. I never touched them. I simply showed them the true nature of the game they'd been playing all their lives. And Dennis Powell, the others who should be dead, won their bets. Mortality was their wager, and they won. Of course, winning always comes with a price. They belong to the house now, eternal employees of an eternal game. I felt the black chip in my pocket grow warm. The Prophet's attention fixed on it. "Ah, you have one of our tokens. That changes things. You're in the game now, Agent Carpenter, whether you want to be or not. I didn't agree to any game. You took the chip. In Vegas, that's all the agreement needed." He stood, his movement still that unsettling glide. but I'm feeling generous. One hand of poker. If you win, you and Agent Rodriguez leave here with your answers, and I close this establishment. If you lose, we become like them, I said, looking at Powell's gray face. Everything has a price. I looked at Janet. She gave me a small nod. We didn't really have a choice. We were outnumbered, outgunned, and dealing with something that operated outside normal law enforcement parameters. One hand, I agreed. The prophet dealt the cards himself, his long fingers moving with inhuman precision. Texas Hold'em, simple and classic. I looked at my cards, ace of spades, ace of hearts, pocket aces, the best starting hand possible. The flop came, ace of diamonds, king of hearts, king of clubs, full house, aces over kings, nearly unbeatable. The prophet didn't look at his cards. All in, he said simply. I hesitated. In poker, when someone goes all in without looking at their cards, they're either bluffing or they know something you don't. But with my hand, the odds of losing were astronomical. Call, I said. He flipped his cards, king of diamonds, king of spades. 4 kings. The only hand that could beat mine given the cards on the table. Impossible, Janet breathed. The odds are, this is Vegas, the prophet said. Odds are just suggestions. The house always wins eternal. But then something strange happened. The black chip in my pocket grew burning hot. I pulled it out and it was glowing, pulsing with a light that hurt to look at. The prophet's expression, what little expression that wax face could show, changed. Where did you get that specific chip? He asked. Morrison's room. No, that's not one of mine. That's... He stood abruptly. You need to leave, now. We won? Nobody wins. But that chip, someone else is playing a game here, someone I didn't invite. For the first time, the prophet looked afraid. Take your partner and go. Don't come back, and whatever you do, don't let them know you have that chip. Who's them? But the prophet was already gone, simply vanished like smoke. The gray-faced people began filing out of the mansion, their movements suddenly panicked. Within minutes, Janet and I were alone in an empty house that now looked abandoned, decades of dust settling in seconds. We ran. As we reached our van, the mansion burst into flames behind us. Not normal flames, they were white, almost silver. And they consumed the building without smoke, without heat we could feel from outside. Within minutes, there was nothing left but a perfectly clean lot, as if the house had never existed. What the hell was that? Janet asked as we drove away. I looked at the chip, now cool and dark again. I think we just stumbled into something bigger than the prophet. Something even he was afraid of. The next morning, there was no record of the mansion ever existing. The lot in Spanish Hills showed on all records as having been empty for 20 years. The prophet, Celestial Holdings, even the suicides of Morrison and Winters. All of it had been erased from official records. Only Janet and I remembered. And the black chip. I had it analyzed by every expert I could find. The material was unknown, not plastic, not clay, not any composite used in casino chips. One physicist at UNLV said it showed properties that suggested it had been manufactured at temperatures that shouldn't be possible on Earth. I keep it locked in a safe now, but sometimes at night I can feel it pulling, calling to me. It wants to be used, wants to be played. And somewhere in Vegas I know there's a game waiting where it's the only currency that matters. But I also know that some games are too dangerous to play, even in a city built on risk. December 1989. Las Vegas was dressed in Christmas lights that seemed garish against the desert backdrop, and I was running on 3 hours of sleep and too much coffee. The black chip sat in my office, safe, but I could feel its presence like a low hum in my bones. Janet had requested a transfer after the prophet incident. Couldn't blame her. And my new partner was Special Agent Marcus Webb, fresh from Quantico with all the confidence that comes from not yet knowing how little you know. The call that changed everything came at 3 a.m. on December 15th. Not to my office phone, but to my home line, which was supposed to be unlisted. Agent Carpenter. The voice was sophisticated, cultured, with a slight accent I couldn't place. "You have something that belongs to me." I sat up, instantly alert. Who is this? Someone who's been playing the long game in Vegas since before it was Vegas. The chip you carry is an invitation, one that was meant for Mr. Morrison before his unfortunate departure from the game. Morrison killed himself. Morrison was eliminated by a competitor. The prophet thought he could run his own table, create his own rules. He learned otherwise. But you, Agent Carpenter, you interest me. You've survived the Sandman, faced the prophet, and still you remain in the game. I'm not playing any game. Everyone in Vegas is playing, whether they know it or not. But you have a choice. Bring the chip to the Landmark Tower, top floor, tomorrow night at midnight. Come alone and I'll answer every question you have about what's really happening in this city. And if I don't, then the 7 people who will disappear tomorrow night will be on your conscience. Check your fax machine, Agent. The line went dead. I went to my home office, where the fax machine was already printing. 7 photographs came through, all FBI personnel from the Las Vegas field office, including Marcus Webb and director Tom Garrett. Each photo had a timestamp for the next night and a location. I couldn't risk their lives, but I also couldn't go in blind. I spent the day researching the Landmark Tower. It had been closed since August, set for demolition. Howard Hughes had once owned the top floors, running his empire from the penthouse while descending into madness. The building had a history of strange incidents, unexplained disappearances, electronic equipment failing, and several construction workers during its building had reported seeing things that shouldn't exist. I told Marcus I was following a lead on an old case, then drove to the Landmark as the sun set on December 16th. The building stood like a monument to abandoned dreams, its distinctive tower shape dark against the glittering strip. The entrance was chained, but the chains had been cut, hanging loose. The lobby was a time capsule from the 1960s, all space-age optimism now covered in dust and decay. The elevators were dead, but one had its doors propped open, revealing a shaft with a new ladder installed. Someone had prepared for my arrival. I climbed. The ascent felt endless, my hands growing raw on the metal rungs. At each floor, I could see through gaps in the elevator doors. Abandoned casino floors, empty hotel rooms, and then, as I climbed higher, things that made less sense. A floor that seemed to be underwater, fish swimming past the elevator doors. A floor that was on fire, but the flames were frozen in place. A floor where gravity seemed to work sideways, furniture bolted to what should have been walls. Finally, I reached the top floor, the penthouse. The doors opened onto impossible luxury. Not abandoned, not decayed, but pristine, as if I'd stepped back into 1969. The room was enormous, floor-to-ceiling windows showing a view of Vegas that couldn't exist. I could see the city from all angles simultaneously, as if the room was slowly rotating. A man sat at a poker table in the center of the room. He was older, distinguished, wearing a perfectly tailored suit that belonged in a different era. His eyes were normal, human, but ancient. They'd seen too much for one lifetime. "Agent Carpenter," he said, gesturing to a chair across from him. "Welcome to the real game. Who are you?" "I've had many names." "Currently, I go by Mr. Silver. I've been in Vegas since 1905, when this was just a water stop for the railroad." I've watched it grow, helped shape it into what it is today. You're over 80 years old? He smiled. I'm much older than that. Vegas isn't the first city I've helped build, just the most interesting. Please, sit. We have much to discuss. I sat, keeping my hand near my weapon. The 7 people in those photographs are perfectly safe as long as we conclude our business tonight. He pulled out a deck of cards, but they weren't normal cards. They seemed to be made of condensed light, shifting and changing as he shuffled them. Vegas was built on a simple premise. People want to believe they can change their fate with a roll of the dice, a turn of the cards. But what if I told you that wasn't a metaphor? I'd say you're insane. The Sandman's victims, what happened to them? They were transformed into silicon-based life forms by a mad scientist. No, Mr. Silver said patiently. They were selected because they'd already begun to transform. Dr. Kemp didn't cause the change. He was trying to understand it. Vegas sits on a unique convergence point, Agent Carpenter. The barriers between possibilities are thin here. Stay too long, gamble too much, and you start to become something else. That's impossible. You've seen Dennis Powell walking after death. You've seen the prophet vanish into nothing. You've climbed through floors that shouldn't exist. At what point do you accept that your definition of possible needs updating? He dealt 5 cards to each of us, face down. The chip you carry is from the original game, the one that decided what Vegas would become. There were 13 players, representatives of different interests, human and otherwise. Morrison found it by accident, didn't understand what he had. The prophet tried to use it to start his own game, but he didn't have the authority. And you do? I'm the last of the original 13. The others have died, transcended, or been consumed by their own bets. I've been maintaining the balance, keeping Vegas from becoming something worse than a city of vice. But I'm tired, Agent Carpenter. I need a successor. I looked at my cards. They showed not suits and numbers, but images. Memories from my life, cases I'd worked, people I'd saved and failed to save. You want me to take over whatever this is? I want you to understand what Vegas really is, Mr. Silver said. It's not just a city. It's a testing ground, a place where human ambition and cosmic forces intersect. Every casino is a temple to chaos theory, every bet a prayer to probability itself. And something has to keep it in balance, or it will consume everything around it. The disappearances, the deaths, would be far worse without management. The prophet was small time, a parasite feeding on the city's energy. The real threats are things like what's growing beneath the Luxor construction site, or what's trying to break through at Area 51, just north of here. Area 51 is military. Area 51 is a patch, a band-aid over something that should never have been uncovered. The nuclear tests in the 50s didn't just crack atoms, Agent Carpenter, they cracked reality. And Vegas, built on that cracked foundation, became something unique. He flipped his cards. 5 aces, an impossible hand. The game we play here determines how much of that wrongness seeps into the regular world. Someone has to play it. Someone has to maintain the rules. And if I refuse, then Vegas collapses into itself within a year. The things held back by the game's rules will be unleashed. The transformation you saw in the Sandman's victims will spread. The prophet's eternal employees will multiply. And worse things, things that have been sleeping in the desert since before humans walked upright, will wake. I looked at my cards again. Now they showed possible futures. Vegas consumed by sand, Vegas frozen in eternal night, Vegas ascending into something beautiful and terrible. And one card showed Vegas as it was, flawed but human, dangerous but contained. What happened to the previous 12 players? Mr. Silver's expression darkened. One became the foundation of Hoover Dam, holding back more than just water. 3 transcended to become part of the city's probability matrix. They're why the house always wins. 2 were consumed by their own gambles. 4 dispersed into the collective unconscious of every gambler who's ever pulled a slot machine. 1 became the prophet you met. And one is trying to return, which is why we need a new player now. The 13th player? We don't speak his name. He bet everything on absolute chaos and lost. He's been imprisoned beneath the desert for 40 years, but the prison is weakening. The chip you carry is the key to keeping him locked away. I stood up. This is insane. Yes, Mr. Silver agreed, but it's also true. And you have to decide, Agent Carpenter. Take my place, keep the game running, protect the world from what Vegas could become, or walk away and watch everything unravel. Why me? Because you've seen enough to believe, but you're still human enough to care. The FBI trained you to investigate, to protect, to serve. This is just a larger jurisdiction than you expected. I thought about all the cases I'd worked, all the impossibilities I'd witnessed. I thought about the 7 FBI agents whose lives hung in the balance. I thought about Janet, who'd fled Vegas rather than face these truths. And I thought about the city itself, millions of people who had no idea they were living on the edge of an abyss. If I agree, what happens? You learn the real rules. You understand the patterns behind the chaos. You keep the balance between the mundane and the impossible. And once a year, on this night, you play a hand against whatever forces are trying to tip that balance. And I can still be an FBI agent. It's the perfect cover. You investigate the spillovers, contain the breaches, maintain the fiction that Vegas is just a city with a crime problem. I picked up the black chip. It was warm now, pulsing with potential. The 7 agents? Safe, as promised. Though Mr. Webb might have some interesting dreams tonight. I made my decision. Maybe it was crazy. Maybe I was being conned by the ultimate Vegas, hustler. But I'd seen too much to pretend the world worked the way I'd been taught at Quantico. Deal me in, I said. Mr. Silver smiled and began dealing a new hand. But this time, the cards showed not images but instructions. Rules for a game that had been playing since Vegas was born. Rules about containing anomalies, managing probability spikes, and preventing incursions from adjacent realities. Your first test comes tomorrow, he said. There's going to be an incident at the new Mirage. Someone's trying to use the volcano installation to open a thermal portal. You'll need to stop them without anyone knowing what really almost happened. And you? I'll be in the background for a few months, teaching you the deeper rules. Then I'll finally rest. I've been playing this game since 1905, Agent Carpenter. It's time for new blood. We played until dawn, and with each hand, I understood more. Vegas wasn't just a city. It was a barrier, a filter, a game board where reality's rules could bend but not break. Every casino was a pressure valve, every gambler a small prayer keeping darker forces at bay. When the sun rose, Mr. Silver stood. The penthouse is yours now. It exists outside normal space. You can access it from any elevator in Vegas if you know the right combination. Your FBI work continues as normal, but now you'll also be managing the real threats. What about evidence, reports? File what keeps people calm. The truth would only cause panic. Let them believe in mobsters and serial killers and mundane corruption. It's safer than knowing what really lurks in the desert. He handed me a key, not metal, but something that felt like crystallized luck. For the vault beneath the Flamingo, everything you need to know is there, accumulated by 13 players over 80 years. Then he walked to the window and simply dispersed, becoming morning light scattered across Vegas. I stood alone in the penthouse, looking out at the city waking below. The view still showed all angles simultaneously, and I could see things now that I'd been blind to before. Patterns in the traffic, convergences of probability, spots where reality wore thin. The black chip in my pocket had changed. It now showed not a pyramid, but a simple image, a card deck with one card missing. My card, my place at the table. I took the ladder back down, each floor looking normal now. The landmark tower was still abandoned, still scheduled for demolition. But I knew it would never fall. Some things were too important to the game to be destroyed. Back at my apartment, I found Marcus Webb asleep at my doorstep. He jolted awake, confused. Carpenter? How did I get here? I was at home. And then I had the strangest dream about fish swimming through casino floors. Too much stress, I told him. Come on, I'll drive you home. As we drove through morning Vegas traffic, I saw the city differently. Every person was a player, whether they knew it or not. Every building was a piece on a board I was now responsible for maintaining. And somewhere beneath the desert, the 13th player waited, testing his prison, looking for weakness. But that was tomorrow's problem. Today, I had to stop someone from turning the Mirage volcano into a portal to somewhere else. Just another day in Vegas, where the house always wins. But someone has to make sure there's still a house left standing. 5 years later, I still carry the black chip. I've stopped 17 incursions, prevented 3 reality collapses, and maintained the fiction that Vegas is just a normal city with unusual crime statistics. The FBI thinks I'm their best agent in Nevada. They have no idea I'm playing a much larger game. Mr. Silver was right. Someone has to maintain the balance. Every tourist who loses their shirt at the tables, every jackpot winner, every suicide from the towers, they're all part of the pattern that keeps Vegas stable and the rest of the world safe from what lurks beneath the neon. Sometimes I see Janet in my dreams, living a normal life in Ohio, having forgotten everything she saw here. That's my doing. A small manipulation of probability to give her peace. She deserved that much. Marcus Webb is still my partner, though he doesn't know about my other responsibilities. He's noticed I solve cases with unusual insight that I always seem to know where to look. But in Vegas, nobody questions success too closely. The Prophet's Mansion never existed in official records, but sometimes I drive by that empty lot and see shadows of what was. The Sandman's victims are all dead, their families compensated by mysterious insurance policies that appeared overnight. Dr. Kemp died in prison, ranting about silicon gods and transformation. The official story is he was insane. The truth is he was too sane, saw too much of what Vegas really is. And the landmark tower still stands, though it's supposed to be demolished. Every year they schedule it, and every year something prevents it. Because some anchors can't be removed without everything else drifting away. I've learned the real history of Vegas, the one not in any books. How Bugsy Siegel wasn't killed by the mob, but by something he unleashed while digging the Flamingo's foundation. How the nuclear tests weren't weapons development, but attempts to close rifts that should never have been opened. How every major casino was built on specific ley lines to channel and contain forces that would otherwise run wild. The game continues. New players join, old ones fold, and the house always wins eternal. But someone has to be the house. Someone has to deal the cards. Someone has to maintain the rules that keep the impossible from becoming inevitable. That someone is me now. Special Agent David Carpenter by day, guardian of probability by night. Investigating murders that are sometimes sacrifices, disappearances that are sometimes ascensions, and crimes that are sometimes necessary evils to prevent something worse. Vegas never sleeps, and neither do I. Because in this city, every roll of the dice could be the one that breaks reality. Every card dealt could open a door that should stay closed, and every bet could be the one that finally lets the 13th player free. But not on my watch. Not while I hold the black chip. Not while I remember what Mr. Silver taught me. In Vegas, the house always wins. You just have to make sure you're the house. The desert holds its secrets, the neon hides the darkness, and somewhere between the real and the impossible I maintain the balance. One hand at a time, one case at a time, one impossibility at a time. Welcome to Las Vegas. Place your bets. But remember, no matter what you think you're gambling for, the real stakes are always higher than you know. And I'll be watching from the penthouse that doesn't exist, in a tower that should be demolished, playing a game that never ends. Because someone has to. Because in Vegas, someone always has to. The eternal game continues, and the house always wins. My name is Special Agent Richard Coleman, and in January 1985, I transferred to the Las Vegas FBI field office from Detroit, where I'd spent 5 years working organized crime. I thought I knew what corruption looked like, thought I'd seen how deep criminal enterprises could embed themselves into a city's foundation. Vegas taught me I didn't know anything. The call came at 4:17 a.m. on February 3, 1985. I'd been in Vegas exactly 29 days, still living out of boxes in a furnished apartment off Sahara Avenue. The phone's ring cut through a dream I immediately forgot, replaced by the dispatcher's clinical tone. "Agent Coleman, we need you at the Sands. There's been an incident in the counting room." The Sands Hotel and Casino was old Vegas royalty, where Sinatra and the Rat Pack had held court in the 60s. By 1985, it was trying to modernize, to shed its mob connections and appeal to a new generation of gamblers. But some stains don't wash out, no matter how much neon you pour over them. I arrived to find the employee entrance cordoned off, Metro police cars creating a barrier of flashing lights against the pre-dawn darkness. Detective Steve Harrison met me at the tape. He was a Vegas lifer, 23 years on the force, with the kind of tired eyes that came from seeing too many bodies in too many alleys. "Fed presence was requested specifically," he said, leading me through a maze of service corridors that smelled like industrial cleaner and cigarette smoke. "When you see it, you'll understand why." The counting room was in the basement, behind 2 sets of security doors that required different keys. It was where the real money lived. Not the chips or markers, but actual cash, sorted and bundled and ready for wherever money goes when it leaves Vegas. The room should have been impenetrable. Should have been. 3 bodies lay among scattered $100 bills that were now evidence. 2 security guards and a counting room supervisor, all shot execution style, single bullets to the back of the head. Professional, clean, except for what the killer had done after. Each victim's mouth had been stuffed with money, not just a few bills, but packed until their jaws had dislocated. $100 bills protruded like green tongues, and on the wall, written in what looked like blood, was a message. "The real audit begins now, VT." "VT," I said aloud. "Vincent Torino?" Harrison nodded grimly. "That's what we're thinking." But Torino's been in federal custody in California for the past 6 months. Racketeering charges. I knew about Torino. Everyone in organized crime enforcement did. He'd run Vegas's shadow economy for 2 decades, had his fingers in everything from skimming operations to murder for hire. But he'd finally been caught, was sitting in a federal detention center awaiting trial. Unless I need to make a call, I said. I found a phone in the security office and called the Federal Detention Center in San Diego. After being transferred 3 times, I got confirmation that made my blood run cold. Vincent Torino was indeed in his cell, had been all night, multiple guards could verify his presence, which meant either someone was killing in his name, or Torino had reached that extended far beyond prison walls. I returned to the counting room where the forensic team was processing the scene. The bills in the victims' mouths were sequential, all from a specific series that, according to the Sands records, had been counted and prepared for deposit just 3 hours before the murders. "How much is missing?" I asked the casino's head of security, a former NYPD detective named Tommy. "That's the thing," Tommy said, rubbing his neck. "Nothing's missing. In fact, there's extra." "Extra?" He showed me the count sheets. "We had $3.2 million ready for pickup. It's all here, plus another 100,000 that shouldn't exist. Bills that aren't in our sequential records weren't counted by our machines. Extra money at a murder scene. In my 5 years working organized crime, I'd never seen that. Criminals took money, they didn't leave it behind. Unless the money itself was the message." I spent the next 12 hours interviewing casino staff. The 3 victims had all been longtime employees with clean records. The guards, Anthony Moss and Carl Brennan, had worked at the Sands for 12 and 15 years respectively. The supervisor, Helen Martinez, had been with the casino since 1971. Helen was like a calculator, one of the count room workers told me. She could spot a counterfeit bill from across the room, knew every serial number pattern the Federal Reserve used. If anyone would notice something wrong with money, it was her. That gave me a thread to pull. I had the extra 100,000 tested by the Secret Service's Counterfeit Division. The bills were real, but they had an unusual characteristic: microscopic traces of human blood embedded in the paper fibers. Not on the bills, but in them, as if the blood had been present during the printing process. "That's impossible," the Secret Service analyst told me over the phone. "Federal Reserve notes are printed under strict security. There's no way biological material could contaminate the paper." But the evidence was undeniable. Someone had printed real money, not counterfeits but actual legal tender, using a process that included human blood. I was contemplating this impossibility when my new partner arrived. Special Agent Jennifer Knox had been with the Bureau for 8 years, working white-collar crime in New York before requesting a transfer to Vegas. She was sharp, methodical, and had a gift for seeing patterns where others saw chaos. "Heard you inherited a weird one," she said, setting a box of files on my desk. "I brought you a present. Every unsolved counting room murder in Vegas for the past 5 years. How many? 17. Different casinos, different MOS, but all involved money that shouldn't exist." I spent the night going through the files with Jennifer. Each case had been investigated separately, treated as isolated incidents, but together they painted a picture of something systemic. Extra money appearing at crime scenes, always with those microscopic blood traces. Victims who were all financial experts, accountants, money counters, casino auditors. "Someone's introducing tainted money into the Vegas economy," Jennifer said, connecting photos on a bulletin board with red string like we were in a conspiracy movie. "But why? What's the point?" The answer came from an unexpected source. 2 days after the Sands murders, I got a call from a federal prisoner in San Diego. Vincent Torino wanted to talk, but only to me, and only in person. The flight to San Diego took 90 minutes. The Federal Detention Center was a concrete fortress that seemed to actively reject the sunlight. Torino was being held in maximum security, awaiting a trial that would likely put him away for life. He didn't look like a mob boss. At 63, Vincent Torino looked like someone's grandfather. Silver hair, reading glasses, a slight stoop to his shoulders. But his eyes were sharp, intelligent, and completely without warmth. "Agent Coleman," he said, sitting across from me in the interview room. "Thank you for coming. I understand someone's been killing in my name. 3 people at the Sands. Your initials were left at the scene." He laughed, a dry sound like paper rustling. My initials. How theatrical. I suppose they think they're sending me a message. Who's they? The same people who've been flooding Vegas with blood money for the past 5 years. The same people who think they can use my reputation while I'm locked in this cage. He leaned forward, chains rattling. "I may be many things, Agent Coleman, but I'm a businessman. Bad money is bad for business. It destabilizes the economy I spent 20 years building." "You're admitting to 20 years of criminal enterprise?" "I'm admitting to understanding how Vegas really works. Every casino skims, everyone knows it. The money flows from the counting rooms to a dozen different pockets. It's a system, balanced, functional. But this blood money, it's poisoning the system. Why should I believe you?" "Because, Agent Coleman, I'm going to give you something the FBI has wanted for years. My complete network. Names, dates, amounts, everything. But in exchange, you're going to stop whoever's behind the blood money." It was an extraordinary offer. Torino's network was the white whale of organized crime enforcement. But I had to be careful. "I need more than your word that you're not involved in these murders." He smiled. "Check the visitor logs. Every Thursday, a priest comes to give me communion. Father Miguel Santos from Our Lady of Sorrows in Vegas. Only he's not a priest, and that's not his real name. He's my messenger, my connection to the outside. Through him, I still run my organization. Check his DNA against the blood in that money. You'll find your killer." I called Jennifer from the detention center parking lot. "I need you to find a Father Miguel Santos, supposedly from Our Lady of Sorrows." 3 hours later, she called back. "There's no Father Santos at that church, but someone using that name has been visiting Torino every Thursday. And here's the interesting part. He's also been visiting 3 other federal prisoners, all former Vegas operators now serving time." We had a pattern. Someone posing as a priest, connecting imprisoned crime bosses, and somehow involved with money that contained human blood. I flew back to Vegas that night, my mind racing with possibilities. The next morning, Jennifer and I sat in a surveillance van outside Our Lady of Sorrows Catholic Church, a modest building in downtown Vegas that served the city's Hispanic community. The real priest, Father Antonio Garza, had no knowledge of any Father Santos but mentioned that someone had been using the church's name at the federal detention center. "He must have forged credentials," Father Garza said. "But why pose as one of our priests specifically?" The answer came when we checked the church's history. Our Lady of Sorrows had been built on the site of an old mission, one of the first structures in what would become Las Vegas. The land had been considered sacred by the Paiute tribe, who believed it was a place where the physical and spiritual worlds touched. "Blood and money," Jennifer muttered, reading from a historical account. The Paiute had a legend about traders who tried to buy the land with gold coins. The tribe's shaman cursed the money, said anyone who used it would have their blood become part of it, trapped forever in the endless circulation of commerce. "That's folklore," I said. But even as I said it, I remembered the blood embedded in the paper fibers. "Maybe," Jennifer said, "but someone believes it enough to kill for it." That afternoon, we got word that Father Miguel Santos was scheduled to visit Torino again the next day. we arranged to be there to intercept him before he could enter the facility. But when Thursday came, no one showed up. The visitor log showed Santos had checked in, had spent an hour with Torino, but security footage showed empty corridors. The guards swore they'd seen him, processed him, but couldn't describe what he looked like. Mass hallucination? Jennifer suggested, but we both knew that was impossible. I decided to confront Torino again. This time, he seemed agitated, worried even. "He knows you're watching," Torino said. "Santos, or whatever his real name is. He told me the blood money operation is accelerating, more murders coming. And he said something else, that the money isn't just tainted with blood. It's collecting souls." "Souls," I repeated flatly. "Every bill that passes through Vegas takes a little piece of whoever touches it. Their greed, their desperation, their hope. Santos claims he's found a way to concentrate that essence, to literally put blood and soul into currency, and once there's enough of it in circulation, something's going to happen." "What?" "He called it the Great Audit. Said Vegas has been accumulating spiritual debt since the first casino opened, and now it's time to collect." I left the detention center more frustrated than ever. We had a killer who might not physically exist, money that contained human blood, and warnings about spiritual debt and soul collection. In Detroit, criminals had been straightforward. They wanted money or power or revenge. In Vegas, even the crimes seemed to operate on a different level of reality. That night, February 10th, the second set of murders occurred. This time, at the Golden Nugget, 5 victims in the counting room, all killed the same way, all with money stuffed in their mouths. The blood message read, 7 days until the audit. The money left at the scene, $500,000 this time, all contained those same blood traces. But now there was something else. Under ultraviolet light, each bill showed a pattern, like a watermark, but made of something that fluorescent photography couldn't quite capture. The pattern hurt to look at directly, caused headaches and nausea in anyone who studied it too long. "We need to find Santos," I told Jennifer. "Real or not, someone's using that identity." We pulled every record we could find. The visitor logs at the Federal Detention Center showed Santos had been visiting for 3 years, always on Thursdays, always seeing former Vegas crime figures. But there were no photographs, no fingerprints, nothing but signatures that changed slightly each time, as if written by different hands. Then Jennifer found something. A rental car had been repeatedly parked at the detention center on Thursdays, registered to Santos Enterprises, LLC. The company's address was a warehouse in North Las Vegas, in an industrial area that had been abandoned since the 70s. We drove out there as the sun was setting, the desert sky turning the color of dried blood. The warehouse was a massive structure, all rusted metal and broken windows, surrounded by a chain-link fence that had been cut in dozens of places. But there were fresh tire tracks leading to a loading dock. Inside, the warehouse had been converted into something that defied explanation. The walls were covered with money, hundreds of thousands of bills arranged in patterns that seemed to move when you weren't looking directly at them. In the center of the space was what looked like an old printing press, but modified with tubes and containers filled with dark liquid. "Is that blood?" Jennifer asked, approaching one of the containers. Before I could warn her not to touch anything, a voice echoed through the warehouse. "It's not just blood. It's the concentrated essence of everyone who's ever lost everything in Vegas." A figure stepped out from behind the printing press. He wore priest's clothing, but his face was wrong. It seemed to shift and change, as if I was seeing dozens of different faces superimposed on each other. "Father Santos, I presume," I said, my hand moving to my weapon. "I've been many people. he replied, his voice carrying harmonics that shouldn't come from a human throat. Santos is just the latest. Before that, I was a card dealer who died in 1963. Before that, a prospector who struck gold and lost it all in 1908. I'm everyone who's ever been consumed by Vegas, and now I'm returning the favor. By killing innocent people. Innocent? He laughed, and the money on the walls rustled like leaves. Helen Martinez skimmed $40,000 over her career. The guards looked the other way when the mob came for their cut. There are no innocent people in Vegas, Agent Coleman. Everyone's complicit in the great machine that turns hope into despair. He moved toward the printing press, and I saw that the tubes weren't just carrying blood. They were connected to something underneath the warehouse floor, something that pulsed with its own rhythm. This city was built on a spiritual fault line, Santos continued. Every bet placed, every dollar lost, every dream destroyed, it all accumulates in the psychic bedrock. The Paiute knew it, tried to warn the settlers, but greed is louder than wisdom. And now, after decades of accumulated suffering, it's time for Vegas to pay its debt. You're insane, Jennifer said, but her voice shook. Am I? Check your own finances, Agent Knox. That investment account you think is secure? It's all tied to Vegas operations. Your retirement, your children's college funds, it all flows through this city's economic heart. Everyone in America has a piece of Vegas in their portfolio, which means everyone shares the debt. He pressed something on the printing press, and it roared to life. But instead of printing money, it seemed to be absorbing it, pulling bills from the walls into its mechanism. In 5 days, Santos said, when enough blood money has circulated through the casinos, the great audit begins. Every dollar that's passed through Vegas will be recalled, will return to its source, carrying with it all the accumulated suffering of this city. The entire American economy will feel it. A spiritual margin call that will make Black Tuesday look like a minor correction. I drew my weapon. Step away from the machine. He laughed again. You can't shoot something that's already dead, Agent Coleman. I'm not a person anymore. I'm a function, a necessary correction in the universe's accounting. I fired anyway. The bullet passed through him like he was made of mist, striking the printing press behind him. The machine shrieked, a sound like 1,000 slot machines paying out at once, and Santos flickered, his face cycling through dozens of identities. You can't stop what's already in motion, he said, his form beginning to dissolve. The blood money is already in circulation. Every casino, every bank, every wallet in Vegas. In 5 days, the audit comes due. Then he was gone, dispersed like smoke. The printing press continued to run, pulling money from the walls, processing it through those tubes of blood, and spitting out new bills that looked identical to federal currency but felt wrong to touch. Jennifer was already on her radio, calling for backup, for hazmat, for anyone who could help us understand what we'd found. But I was staring at the machine, at the tubes that disappeared into the floor, and I realized that destroying the press wouldn't be enough. Whatever was underneath the warehouse, whatever Santos had tapped into, it was bigger than one machine, one man, one conspiracy. We had 5 days to stop Vegas from collecting a debt that could collapse the entire American economy. 5 days to understand how money could carry souls, how blood could be printed into currency, how a city built on chance could become a weapon aimed at the heart of capitalism itself. And somewhere, in a federal detention center, Vincent Torino was laughing, because he'd known all along that the real crime in Vegas wasn't the skimming or the murders or the mob connections. The real crime was the city itself, and everyone who'd ever fed it $1 was an accomplice. The FBI's Washington headquarters didn't believe us at first. Jennifer and I spent 6 hours on secure video conference, showing evidence, explaining what we'd found, and watching as deputy directors and financial crimes specialists struggled to accept that someone was printing legal tender mixed with human blood as part of an economic terrorist attack based on Native American curses. Agent Coleman, Deputy Director Harold Morrison said, his face pixelated on the conference room screen, "Are you seriously suggesting we evacuate Las Vegas based on a ghost story?" "I'm suggesting," I said, trying to keep my voice level, "that we have documented evidence of contaminated currency in circulation, multiple homicides, and a credible threat to the economic infrastructure. Whether you believe the spiritual aspect or not, someone is acting on these beliefs and has already killed 8 people. Jennifer added the practical angle. "We've tested the bills. They're not counterfeits. They register as legal tender in every way, but they contain biological material that shouldn't be there. If nothing else, it's a public health risk." That got their attention. The idea of contaminated money spreading disease was something Washington could understand and act on. Within 2 hours, we had a joint task force authorization with the Secret Service, CDC, and Treasury Department. We had 4 days left. The warehouse had been sealed by local hazmat teams, but when we returned with federal resources, we found something disturbing. The printing press was gone. Not destroyed, not dismantled, gone. The floor where it had stood showed no bolt marks, no indication it had ever been there. Only the blood-stained money on the walls remained, and even that was disappearing. Bills fluttering away like moths despite the sealed environment. "Someone moved it," Jennifer insisted. "A machine that size doesn't just vanish." But the security footage we'd set up showed nothing. One frame the press was there, the next it wasn't. No time gap, no camera malfunction. It simply ceased to exist in that location. Dr. Emily Patterson from the CDC arrived that afternoon. She was a specialist in biological contaminants, had worked on anthrax cases and viral outbreaks. She took one look at our blood money samples and went pale. "This isn't just blood," she said, adjusting her microscope. "There are neural tissues here, microscopic amounts of brain matter. It's as if someone liquefied human consciousness and embedded it in the paper fibers." "That's impossible," I said, though I was getting tired of saying that word in Vegas. "The structure is impossible," she agreed, "but it's there." And more disturbing, the tissue is still showing electrical activity. At a cellular level, this money is alive. While Emily continued her analysis, Jennifer and I focused on tracking the circulation of the contaminated bills. Every casino in Vegas used sequential tracking for large denominations, so we could theoretically trace where the blood money had gone. But the records were showing anomalies. Bills were appearing in multiple locations simultaneously. The same serial numbers logged at the Flamingo and the MGM Grand at the exact same time. "Quantum money," Jennifer muttered, staring at the data. "It's existing in multiple places at once until someone observes it. Then it collapses into a single location. That's not how money works. That's not how anything works, but here we are." I decided we needed more information about the spiritual side of this, the Paiute legend Santos had mentioned. I found Dr. Joseph Blackwater, a professor of Native American Studies at UNLV and a member of the Las Vegas Paiute tribe. He agreed to meet us at his office that evening. Dr. Blackwater was in his 70s with deep lines around his eyes and hands that moved carefully, deliberately, as if every gesture had meaning. When I explained what we'd found, he didn't seem surprised. "My grandfather told me about the curse," he said, pulling out a leather journal filled with handwritten notes. "But it wasn't a curse exactly. It was a warning. The land where Vegas sits is what we call a hunger place, a location where the physical and spiritual worlds are thin, where energy can be transformed from one state to another. Energy like money? Jennifer asked. Money is energy, Blackwater explained. It represents work, time, life force. In most places, that's just metaphorical. But in a hunger place, metaphors can become literal. Every transaction leaves a trace. Every loss creates a debt. The elders knew this, tried to warn the settlers, but they built a city devoted to taking people's money anyway, I finished. Not just taking, Blackwater corrected. Consuming. Vegas doesn't just take your money, it takes pieces of your soul, your hope, your dreams. And according to the legend, when enough spiritual energy has been accumulated, the hunger place feeds. Feeds on what? Everything. Everyone who's ever contributed to its hunger. The Great Audit, as your mysterious priest called it, is the settling of accounts. All that consumed energy returns to its source, but transformed, corrupted. That night, February 11th, the third set of murders occurred. 7 victims this time at the new Westgate complex. Same execution style, same money stuffed in mouths, but the message was different. 3 days, your deposits are due. The money left at this scene was different too. Under Emily's microscope, the neural tissue was more organized, showing patterns that resembled actual neural networks. The bills were becoming more alive, more conscious. It's learning, Emily said, her voice tight with controlled panic. The money is developing awareness. I called Torino at the detention center. He answered on the first ring, as if he'd been waiting. It's accelerating, isn't it? He said without preamble. Santos told me you tried to stop him. Futile. He's not working alone, you know. Who else is involved? Every casino owner who's ever skimmed. Every politician who's taken a bribe. Every tourist who's lost their mortgage payment at the tables. Vegas corrupts everyone it touches, and now everyone's part of the mechanism. You're part of it too, I pointed out. Oh, I know. Why do you think I'm really in federal custody? It's the only way to avoid being in Vegas when the audit hits. Prison might be the only safe place in America when this goes down. The next morning, February 12th, the contaminated money started showing physical effects on people who handled it. Casino workers were reporting headaches, vivid nightmares, and in 3 cases, temporary paralysis. The victims all described the same sensation, feeling like something was crawling under their skin, trying to get out. We tried to implement a recall to get the contaminated bills out of circulation, but it was impossible. The money had spread too far, too fast. And more disturbingly, people didn't want to give it up. Even knowing it was contaminated, gamblers held on to the bills, said they felt lucky. It's affecting their minds, Emily reported. The neural tissue in the bills is interfacing with human nervous systems, influencing behavior. It wants to stay in circulation. Jennifer had been tracking Santos, or whatever entity was using that identity. She found references going back decades. Always different names, but the same pattern. Someone appearing during times of economic crisis in Vegas, conducting strange financial rituals, then vanishing. The last major appearance was in 1958, just before a series of casino failures that nearly destroyed the city. But Vegas survived that crisis, I pointed out. Because someone made a deal, Jennifer said, showing me old newspaper accounts. A group of casino owners met in secret, performed some kind of ceremony. The exact details were never recorded, but afterwards, Vegas boomed. The mob money flowed in, the city expanded, and the hunger grew. You're saying they fed the hunger place? I'm saying they made Vegas into a feeding mechanism. Every casino, every slot machine, every poker table became part of a massive spiritual digestive system. And now, 30 years later, it's full. It needs to excrete. The metaphor was disgusting but apt. Vegas had been consuming human hopes and dreams for decades, and now all that spiritual waste was about to be expelled back into the world. On February 13th, 2 days before the supposed audit, banks started reporting anomalies. ATMs were dispensing bills that didn't match their serial number records. Electronic transfers were showing impossible patterns, money moving backwards through time, appearing in accounts before the transfer was initiated. The Federal Reserve called an emergency meeting. The Secret Service was mobilized. But what could they do? The contamination wasn't just physical anymore. It had spread into the electronic systems, the digital infrastructure of American finance. "We need to evacuate Vegas," I told Morrison in another video conference. "The public would panic. The economic impact will be far worse if we do nothing," I interrupted. "Sir, with all due respect, we're not dealing with normal terrorism here. This is an attack on the conceptual level of money itself." But Washington wouldn't budge. Too much money at stake, too many interests involved. Vegas generated billions in revenue. They wouldn't shut it down based on what they still saw as superstition. That night, I couldn't sleep. I stood on the balcony of my apartment, looking out at the neon skyline of Vegas, and I could swear I saw patterns in the lights. The casinos weren't just buildings anymore. They were organs in a vast body, pulsing with the circulation of contaminated currency. Jennifer called at 3 a.m. "I found something. Santos isn't working alone. There's a whole network, people in key positions throughout Vegas's financial infrastructure. And Richard, they're all dead." "What do you mean?" "Every person connected to this operation died years ago. Deaths that were recorded, buried, certified, but they're still working, still moving through the city, still handling money. Vegas isn't just feeding on spiritual energy. It's reanimating its servants." I thought of Santos, how he'd claimed to be multiple people, how bullets passed through him. Not a ghost, but something worse, a function of the city itself, an antibody produced by Vegas's immune system to protect its feeding mechanism. The morning of February 14th came with catastrophe. Every casino on the Strip reported the same phenomenon at exactly 6 a.m. All their slot machines paid out simultaneously. Not jackpots, but strange amounts. $17.76, $19.29, $19.58, $20.01. Years that meant something to Vegas, dates of significance in the city's history. The money that poured out was all contaminated bills, all containing that neural tissue, all alive with impossible consciousness. People grabbed the money desperately, stuffing their pockets, fighting over bills that seemed to whisper promises. Within an hour, 300 people had been hospitalized with seizures. The neural tissue in the money was interfacing directly with their nervous systems, downloading something into their minds. Emily was at the hospital trying to treat the victims. She called me, her voice shaking. "Richard, they're all saying the same thing. They're seeing visions of everyone who's ever lost money in Vegas. Millions of faces, all demanding their money back, with interest. Interest calculated in souls," I muttered. The final murders came that afternoon. Not in a casino this time, but at the Federal Reserve Bank of San Francisco's Las Vegas branch. 13 employees, all found dead in the vault, arranged in a circle around a pile of contaminated money that had formed itself into a perfect pyramid. The message written in blood was different this time, longer. "The audit begins at midnight. Every dollar taken, every dream broken, every soul consumed. The hunger place feeds no more. The great excretion begins. Vegas returns all debts with compound interest." Jennifer and I stood in that vault, surrounded by death and impossible money, and we knew we had less than 8 hours to stop something we didn't fully understand. "We need to find where Santos is going to conduct the final ritual," Jennifer said. "How?" "He could be anywhere." "No," I said, sudden understanding hitting me. "He'll be at the source. The original hunger place. Where Vegas truly began." Dr. Blackwater had mentioned it in passing. The springs that gave Las Vegas its name. The waters that first drew travelers to this spot in the desert. They were mostly paved over now, buried under concrete and neon, but they still existed, deep beneath the city. We found the access point in the basement of the Plaza Hotel, one of the oldest casinos downtown. A maintenance tunnel that supposedly led to water pipes, but actually went much deeper, much further back in time. The hotel security tried to stop us, but our federal authority and drawn weapons convinced them to step aside. The tunnel was older than it should be, carved from rock that predated Vegas by centuries. The walls were covered in pictographs, not Native American, but something older, stranger. Images of tentacles made of currency, of humans transforming into coins, of a great mouth that swallowed gold and excreted darkness. As we descended, the temperature dropped, and we could hear something, a rhythmic pulsing, like a massive heart beating. The contaminated bills and evidence bags began to glow, resonating with whatever lay ahead. The tunnel opened into a vast cavern, impossible to exist under Vegas without every building above collapsing. In the center was a pool of water that glowed with its own light, and standing beside it was Santos. But not just Santos. Dozens of figures, all wearing the faces of people who died in Vegas over the decades. The collective servants of the hunger place. "Agent Coleman," Santos said, his voice echoing from every throat simultaneously. "You're just in time for the finale." Around the pool, millions of contaminated bills were arranged in intricate patterns, forming a mandala of money that hurt to look at. The bills were moving on their own, crawling like living things, organizing themselves into increasingly complex configurations. "At midnight," Santos continued, "every dollar that's ever passed through Vegas will be recalled. Not physically, that would be too simple. Spiritually. Every person who's ever lost money here will lose the equivalent in life force. Years of existence collected with compound interest. Millions of people will die," Jennifer said. "Billions," Santos corrected. "Vegas's reach extends far beyond America now. Global finance, international wire transfers, cryptocurrency. It's all touched by Vegas's hunger. When the audit completes, the spiritual debt will be collected from everyone, everywhere, all at once." I raised my weapon, knowing it was useless. "Why? What's the point?" "The hunger place must feed. It's been patient for so long, accepting small offerings, nibbling at the edges of souls. But now it's ready for a feast, and after it feeds, it will sleep again, and Vegas will be just a normal city. Until the hunger returns. How do we stop it?" Santos laughed, that horrible, multi-voice sound. "You can't stop it. You can only redirect it. Feed it something else, something bigger than the accumulated debt." I thought about Torino's words, about prison being the only safe place. Then I understood. "You need us to make a choice," I said. "That's why you left clues, why you let us find you. The hunger place feeds on choices, on gambles. You're offering us a bet." Santos's many faces smiled. "Very good, Agent. Yes, a wager. The ultimate Vegas gamble. Your souls against the debt. If you win, the audit is canceled. The contaminated money becomes inert, and Vegas returns to normal. If you lose, you join us, become servants of the hunger place forever." "What's the game?" Jennifer asked. "No game, just a choice. One of you stays, becomes the new guardian of the hunger place, feeding it small amounts to keep it from gorging. The other goes free, saves the world. But you have to choose which one, and you have to choose now. I looked at Jennifer. She was 32, had a husband, 2 kids. I was 43, divorced, married to the job. The math was simple. "I'll stay," I said. "No," Jennifer said immediately. "I'm the one who found the pattern. I'm the one who understands the financial side. I should stay. That's exactly why you need to go. Someone has to explain this, to make sure it doesn't happen again." "How touching," Santos said. "But the choice must be genuine. No nobility, no sacrifice. A true gamble, I'll make it simple." He pulled out a silver dollar, old and worn. "Heads, Coleman stays. Tails, Knox stays. The hunger place will know if you try to influence the outcome." I took the coin. It was heavier than it should be and warm to the touch. I could feel the weight of every bet ever placed in Vegas, every hope and dream and desperate last chance compressed into this single piece of silver. "Call it," I said to Jennifer. "Heads," she said, her voice barely a whisper. I flipped the coin. Time seemed to slow as it rose, spinning in the cavern's strange light. I thought about my life, about the cases I'd worked, the criminals I'd caught. I thought about Vegas, this impossible city that consumed people and excreted broken dreams. The coin landed in my palm. Tails. Jennifer screamed, "No!" But it was already happening. The contaminated money began flowing toward her, not physically but spiritually. Streams of light that entered her body and transformed her on a cellular level. Her eyes went wide, then began to glow with that same inner light as the pool. "The compact is sealed," Santos said. "Agent Knox is now the guardian. The audit is canceled. The debt is deferred." The cavern began to shake. Santos and the other servants started to dissolve. Their long service finally ended. As they faded, Santos spoke one last time. "She'll need to feed it, Coleman. Small amounts regularly. A few souls here and there. People who won't be missed. If she doesn't, if she lets it get too hungry, this will all happen again. And next time, there won't be a choice." Then they were gone, and Jennifer stood alone by the glowing pool. She looked at me, and her face was different, not physically, but something in her expression, something ancient and hungry. "Go," she said, her voice carrying harmonics it hadn't before. "Get out of Vegas. Never come back. And Richard, make sure they understand. This city isn't entertainment. It's a mouth, and it needs to eat." I ran, up through the tunnels, past the confused security, out into the neon night of Vegas. It was 11:58 p.m. on February 14th. I stood on Fremont Street and watched the clock tick toward midnight. At exactly 12 a.m., every light in Vegas flickered simultaneously. For just a moment, the city went dark, and in that darkness, I heard it. A vast swallowing sound, like the universe's largest throat consuming something massive. Then the lights came back, and everything seemed normal. The contaminated money turned inert within hours, becoming just regular bills with unusual biological contamination. The CDC cleaned it up, declared it a bizarre but ultimately harmless incident. The murders were attributed to a serial killer who was never caught. The official story was that mass hysteria had caused the seizures and visions. Vincent Torino died in his cell 3 days later, cause unknown. The other imprisoned crime bosses who'd been visited by Santos all passed within a week. Their debts, apparently, had been called in. Jennifer Knox was listed as missing in action, presumed dead. Only I knew the truth, that she was still down there, in that impossible cavern, feeding the hunger place just enough to keep it from devouring the world. every unexplained disappearance in Vegas, every tourist who vanished without a trace. That was Jennifer doing her job, maintaining the balance. I tried to leave Vegas, I really did. After Jennifer's transformation, after watching her become the guardian of that hungry void beneath the city, I put in for an immediate transfer. Director Morrison approved it without question. The official report I'd filed was sanitized, mentioning only that Agent Knox had been killed in the line of duty while preventing a terrorist attack on the financial system. I was reassigned to the Chicago field office, given a commendation, and told to forget about Vegas. But Vegas wouldn't forget about me. It started 3 months later, in May of 1985. I was investigating a standard money laundering case in Chicago when I noticed anomalies in the financial records. Small amounts of money were disappearing from accounts, always in specific quantities. $17.76, $19.29, $19.58, the same amounts that had poured from the slot machines during the crisis. The money was moving on its own, flowing back toward Vegas like water, finding its level. I called Dr. Emily Patterson at the CDC. She'd been monitoring the health effects of the contaminated money incident, tracking people who'd been exposed. "Richard, thank God you called," she said. "I've been seeing patterns in the data. People who handled the contaminated bills, even after they were supposedly inert, they're showing behavioral changes. Increased gambling, risky financial decisions, and they all have this compulsion to visit Vegas." "How many people are affected?" "Thousands, maybe tens of thousands. And Richard, they're all having the same dream. They see a woman standing by a pool of light, calling them home. Jennifer. Even as the guardian, she was still FBI, still trying to send messages. I booked a flight to Vegas that night. The city looked the same as I'd left it. Neon and noise, promise and despair in equal measure. But now I could see what I'd been blind to before. Patterns in the crowd movements, rhythms in the casino sounds, a pulse beneath the surface that matched the beating I'd heard in that cavern. I went to the Plaza Hotel first, but the maintenance tunnel that had led to Jennifer was sealed with concrete so new it was still damp. The hotel manager claimed it had always been that way, that there had never been a tunnel. The surveillance footage from February had been mysteriously corrupted, showing nothing but static for the crucial hours. But Jennifer had taught me to look for patterns, and patterns led me to other entrances. Vegas was honeycombed with tunnels, some official, some forgotten, some that shouldn't exist at all. I found one beneath the Binion's horseshoe, hidden behind a false wall in the lowest level of their parking garage. This tunnel was different from the one in February. The walls were covered in accounting ledgers, thousands of them, dating back to 1931 when gambling was legalized in Nevada. Each ledger recorded not just money but names, dates, and something else. A column labeled Essence Extracted, with measurements in units I didn't recognize. The tunnel led to a different chamber, smaller than the one with the pool. Jennifer was there, but she wasn't alone. 3 other figures stood with her, all glowing with that same inner light, all wearing faces I recognized from missing persons reports spanning decades. "You shouldn't have come back, Richard," Jennifer said without turning around. She was standing before a massive ledger, making entries with a pen that seemed to write in light rather than ink. "People are being affected. The contamination is spreading." "Not contamination," she corrected. "Integration. Vegas is establishing a permanent connection with everyone who's ever gambled here. It's the only way to manage the hunger. Spread it out, make everyone a small part of the feeding mechanism instead of consuming a few completely. That's not what we agreed to." She finally turned, and I saw that her eyes had changed. They showed depth that shouldn't exist, like looking into a well that went down forever. We agreed to stop the Great Audit. This is how it's done. The hunger place needs to feed Richard. I can either let it take a few completely, or I can let it nibble from millions. Which is more humane? Neither. We need to find a way to destroy it. The other Guardians laughed, a sound like slot machines paying out in harmony. Destroy it? One said, a man whose missing persons report dated from 1962. Vegas is the hunger place now. Every casino, every hotel, every neon sign is part of its digestive system. To destroy it, you'd have to destroy the entire city. Then that's what we do. Jennifer shook her head. 40 million tourists a year. 500,000 residents. The economic impact would destroy Nevada, possibly trigger a national recession. Is that better than what I'm doing? You're stealing souls. I'm managing them, redirecting them. Look. She showed me the ledger she'd been writing in. The entries were incredibly complex, tracking not just money, but what she called spiritual energy flow. Every bet placed in Vegas generated this energy, and Jennifer was carefully directing it, using mathematical models that looked like they belonged in a physics textbook rather than an accounting ledger. The hunger place is like a reactor, she explained. It needs fuel to keep stable. If it doesn't get enough, it goes critical. That's what almost happened in February. If it gets too much, it explodes, taking half the Southwest with it. I'm maintaining the balance. By killing people. By selecting those who've already given themselves to Vegas completely. Gambling addicts who've lost everything. Criminals who've killed for money. People who've sold their souls, piece by piece at the tables. I'm not taking anything they haven't already offered. It was a horrible logic, but it was logic. Jennifer had always been good at finding patterns, making sense of chaos. Now she was applying those skills to managing a supernatural entity that fed on human misery. There has to be another way, I insisted. Find one, she said. But until you do, I have to keep feeding it. 3 souls a week, minimum. That's the baseline to keep it stable. I spent the next week in Vegas researching everything I could about the hunger place. Dr. Blackwater helped, sharing tribal knowledge that had never been written down. The place had existed long before humans arrived, he said. It was a natural formation, a point where the universe's accounting system manifested physically. The Paiute had learned to live with it, making small offerings to keep it satisfied. But then the city came, Blackwater said. Casinos amplified its hunger 1,000-fold. What used to be satisfied with a few prayers and some burned sage now needs human souls to stay quiet. Can it be moved, relocated? Where would you put it? Another city would just become another Vegas. The hunger place doesn't create greed. It feeds on greed that already exists. Anywhere humans gather and want more than they have, it could take root. I was running out of options when Emily called with new data. The people affected by the contaminated money weren't just showing behavioral changes, they were showing physiological ones. Their brain chemistry was altering, producing unusual neurotransmitters that didn't match any known compounds. It's like they're developing a new organ, Emily said. A spiritual organ that processes luck and probability as physical sensations. Is it harmful? That's the strange part. They're actually healthier. Lower stress, better immune response, increased longevity. As long as they gamble regularly, small amounts, they show improved health markers across the board. The hunger place wasn't just feeding on them. It was creating a symbiotic relationship. They fed it small amounts of spiritual energy through gambling, and it returned vitality to them. Jennifer hadn't just stopped the Great Audit, she'd transformed Vegas into a massive spiritual recycling system. I confronted her with this information that night, finding her in a new location, a sub-basement beneath Caesar's palace that shouldn't have existed according to any blueprint. "You're not just managing it," I said. "You're evolving it, turning Vegas into some kind of spiritual parasite." "Symbiont," she corrected. "Parasites kill their hosts. This keeps them alive, even enhances them. Would you rather I let it go back to pure consumption?" "I'd rather find a way to break the cycle entirely." "Then you'd better hurry, because the integration is accelerating and soon it'll be irreversible." She was right. Every day, more people were showing the changes Emily had documented. Vegas was becoming something new, a hybrid of city and entity, feeding on and feeding back to everyone who touched its economy. I returned to Chicago, but I couldn't let it go. I used FBI resources to track financial patterns, following the money as it flowed in and out of Vegas. What I found was disturbing. The contaminated bills hadn't been destroyed as reported. They'd been absorbed into the Federal Reserve System, their biological components somehow integrating with the printing process. New bills were being printed with microscopic traces of the same neural tissue, spreading the contamination through the entire money supply. Within a year, every dollar bill in America would carry a piece of the hunger place. I tried to raise the alarm, but who would believe me? The official story was locked down, the evidence destroyed or classified beyond my access level. The few people who knew the truth, like Emily and Dr. Blackwater, were bound by national security orders to stay silent. But Jennifer had left me a way to communicate. In the patterns of financial transactions, in the seemingly random fluctuations of casino revenues, she encoded messages. She was teaching me to read the city's new language, to understand what Vegas was becoming. By December 1985, 1 year after the crisis, the transformation was nearly complete. Vegas had evolved from a city that fed on human vice to something unprecedented, a living economic entity that existed simultaneously in the physical and spiritual realms. Every casino was now a cell in its body, every slot machine a synapse, every poker table a digestive organ processing hope and excreting probability. And Jennifer was its brain, directing its growth, managing its hunger, protecting humanity from its worst impulses while enabling its expansion. She'd become something beyond human, a hybrid of FBI agent and cosmic accountant, forever calculating the balance between consumption and sustainability. I made one last trip to Vegas on December 24, 1985. Christmas Eve in Sin City was surreal. Santa hats on showgirls, wreaths on slot machines, carols playing between the constant ding of jackpots. I found Jennifer in a new location, a penthouse suite at the top of the under-construction mirage that wouldn't officially exist for another 3 years. She looked more human than she had in months, though the glow still emanated from within her skin. "You came to say goodbye," she said. It wasn't a question. "I came to ask one last time, is there any way to reverse this?" "No. But Richard, that's not necessarily bad. Look at what Vegas is becoming." She showed me plans, blueprints that existed in light rather than on paper. Vegas's future laid out in impossible detail. A city that would grow to become the entertainment capital of the world, but also something more. A place where the boundary between reality and possibility was negotiable, where luck could be literally manufactured, where dreams and nightmares had exchange rates. "In 10 years," she said, "Vegas will be the most important city in America. Not politically or economically, but spiritually. It will be where humanity comes to terms with its relationship with chance, with risk, with the fundamental uncertainty of existence, by feeding on their souls, by trading with their souls. Fair exchange, clearly marked prices. The house always wins, but now everyone knows it, accepts it, participates willingly. No more hidden costs, no more invisible predation. Just honest consumption. That's monstrous. That's evolution. We stood there, in that impossible penthouse, looking out at the lights of Vegas spreading across the desert like a living thing, which, I now understood, it was. "What happens to you?" I asked. "Do you stay human at all?" "I stay what Vegas needs me to be. Guardian, accountant, interpreter between the city and the people who feed it. It's not the life I planned, but it's the life that's needed. I could stay. Help you." She smiled, and for a moment, she was just Jennifer Knox, FBI agent, my partner. "No, you need to go back to the world. Keep investigating normal crimes, maintaining the illusion that reality is simple. Someone needs to remember what normal looks like, in case we ever find a way back to it." I left Vegas that night and never returned, but I couldn't escape it. The contaminated money had spread everywhere, creating a network that connected every person who used cash to the hunger place. The symptoms were subtle: a slight increase in risk-taking behavior, a new appreciation for games of chance, dreams of neon lights regardless of where people lived. Vegas had won, not through force or fear, but through integration. It had become part of the global economic system, a necessary organ in the body of capitalism. And Jennifer Knox, FBI agent turned cosmic guardian, managed it all from her impossible chambers beneath the city, maintaining the balance between consumption and catastrophe. I continued my FBI career for another 20 years, investigating financial crimes that increasingly showed Vegas's influence. Ponzi schemes that followed the patterns of slot machine algorithms. Embezzlement cases where the stolen money moved on its own toward Nevada. Missing persons who were found years later working in casinos, with no memory of how they got there, but showing those same neural changes Emily had documented. Each case was covered up, explained away, normalized. The truth was too big, too integrated into everything to ever be exposed. Vegas had evolved from a city to a concept to a living system that touched every financial transaction in America. And somewhere beneath the neon, Jennifer Knox continued her eternal audit, balancing the books between the human and the inhuman, the possible and the impossible, the house and the players. She'd saved the world by transforming it, prevented catastrophe by enabling a different kind of consumption. The last message I received from her came through the pattern of the stock market crash of 1987. Hidden in the numbers, coded in the losses and gains, was a simple statement. The house always wins, but now we are all the house. I understood then that Vegas's transformation wasn't corruption, but revelation. It had always been a hunger place, had always fed on human dreams and desires. Jennifer had just made the process visible, manageable, sustainable. Instead of explosive consumption, steady feeding. Instead of hidden predation, open transaction. The price of preventing the great audit hadn't been Jennifer's soul or the souls of Vegas's victims. It had been the soul of money itself, transformed from a medium of exchange to a living system that connected every user to the great hunger that drove all commerce, all desire, all human ambition. Vegas had become the dark heart of capitalism, pumping contaminated currency through the global economy, feeding on microscopic portions of everyone while keeping the system stable. And Jennifer Knox, guardian of the hunger place, the FBI agent who'd become something more and less than human, would manage that balance forever, or at least until someone found a better solution. But knowing what I know, seeing what I've seen, I don't think there is a better solution. The hunger place is part of us, has always been part of us. Vegas just gave it form, gave it rules, gave it limits. And Jennifer gave it management, preventing it from consuming everything by allowing it to consume a little of everyone. The house always wins. But now we understand the game, even if we can't stop playing. 20 years have passed since I left Vegas for the last time. It's now 2005, and I'm retired from the FBI, living in a small town in Maine, about as far from Nevada as you can get while still being in America. But distance doesn't matter anymore. Vegas is everywhere. The neural tissue that was in those contaminated bills has evolved, adapted, integrated completely with the currency system. Not just physical money, credit cards, wire transfers, even the new digital payment systems all carry traces of it. The hunger place has gone viral, spreading through every transaction, every exchange of value. People don't notice the change because it happened gradually. The increased risk-taking, the fascination with probability, the dreams of neon lights. It's all been normalized. Gambling has been legalized in most states now, each one claiming they need the revenue, but really responding to the hunger place's need for more feeding grounds. Jennifer still sends messages, though less frequently. Through patterns in economic data, through the arrangement of cards in poker tournaments broadcast on TV, through the specific times that certain slot machines pay out. She's still down there, still managing the balance, but she's changed. The last clear message I received showed me what she's become. Not human anymore, not entirely. She exists in multiple states simultaneously. Part of her in that cavern beneath Vegas, part of her distributed through every contaminated bill, part of her in the dreams of everyone who's ever gambled. She's become the antibody that keeps the hunger place from consuming everything, but also the enzyme that enables its digestion. Dr. Emily Patterson died last year. Before she passed, she sent me her final research. The neural tissue hasn't just integrated with money, it's integrated with us. Every person who's handled contaminated currency, which is everyone, now has microscopic amounts of it in their bloodstream. We're all part of the hunger place now, all contributing to and feeding from its endless circulation. It's not parasitism, her final notes read. It's not even symbiosis, it's identity. We've become one organism, humanity and the hunger place, inseparable and interdependent. Vegas isn't feeding on us. We've become Vegas. She was right. I see it in everyone now, the subtle glow behind their eyes when they make a risky decision, the way their fingers twitch when they handle money as if the bills are whispering to them. The transformation Jennifer prevented by accepting, the great audit that would have destroyed everything, has happened anyway, just slowly, gently, with our unconscious consent. The young FBI agents don't know the truth. The ones who investigate financial crimes in Vegas think they're dealing with normal human corruption. They don't see the patterns Jennifer leaves for those who know how to look, don't understand that the criminals they catch are just the ones the hunger place has decided to excrete, the spiritual waste products of its vast digestive system. Vincent Torino was right in a way. Prison was the safest place during the acute crisis. But there's no escaping the chronic condition. The hunger place has metabolized into our entire economic system. Every transaction feeds it. Every dollar carries its consciousness. Every bet placed anywhere in the world resonates in that chamber beneath Vegas where Jennifer maintains her eternal vigil. Sometimes I dream of her, standing by that glowing pool. But she's not alone anymore. Thousands of figures stand with her, all the people who've been completely consumed over the years, their consciousness absorbed into the management system. They're not dead, not exactly, they're functional, part of the great mechanism that keeps the hunger balanced. In the dream, Jennifer turns to me and speaks, but her voice is the sound of every slot machine in Vegas harmonizing. We won, Richard. We prevented the catastrophe by becoming it. The audit never ends now. It happens every second, in every transaction, forever. The house always wins because we are all the house, and the house is us. I wake from these dreams with the taste of copper in my mouth. The same taste as blood, as money, as the fundamental currency of life itself. The transformation is complete. Vegas won by losing, consumed by being consumed, spread its hunger through the entire world until there was no distinction between the parasite and the host. Jennifer Knox saved us all by damning us all to a kind of economic vampirism we don't even recognize as abnormal anymore. And somewhere in Vegas, in those impossible chambers that exist between the physical and financial realms, she continues her work, balancing the books of souls, managing the hunger that drives all commerce, maintaining the equilibrium between consumption and collapse. The younger agents who work financial crimes don't know they're actually investigating spiritual mechanics. The casino operators don't know they're priests in a vast feeding ritual. The gamblers don't know they're participating in a literal economy of souls. But I know. Jennifer made sure I would know, would remember, would record the truth even if no one believes it. Vegas isn't a city anymore. It's a condition, a state of being that's infected every aspect of modern life. The hunger place isn't located beneath Nevada. It's everywhere money exists, which is everywhere humans exist. We've all been transformed into components of its digestive system, processing hope into probability, dreams into statistics, souls into currency. The contaminated bills from 1985 weren't an attack on the economic system. They were an inoculation, preparing us for integration with something that had always existed alongside human ambition. The hunger place didn't invade us. We evolved to accommodate it, guided by Jennifer's invisible hand, maintaining the balance between our humanity and our hunger. The house always wins. But the revelation Jennifer died to protect, the truth she transformed herself to manage, is that we are all the house now. Every person who's ever touched money, made a bet, taken a risk, dreamed of more than they have. We're all part of the vast organism that Vegas has become. And in the end, that might be the most human thing of all. We've always been creatures of hunger, of wanting more, of gambling against probability. Vegas just gave that hunger form, rules, and through Jennifer's sacrifice, boundaries that keep it from consuming everything at once. The great audit never happened because it's always happening. In every transaction, forever. The spiritual debt is never collected because it's constantly being serviced. Microscopic payments extracted from every exchange, a value in the global economy. Jennifer Knox disappeared from FBI records in 1985. But she's more present now than ever, distributed through the financial system like a ghost in the machine, managing the hunger that drives everything, maintaining the balance that keeps the world turning. I'm 80 years old now, and I won't live much longer. When I die, I know where I'll go. Not heaven or hell, but to that chamber beneath Vegas where Jennifer stands eternal watch. I'll become part of the management system, another consciousness absorbed into the great work of balancing humanity's hunger with its survival. It's not the retirement I planned, but it's the one the world needs. Someone has to help Jennifer manage the equations, calculate the exchanges, maintain the barriers between what we were and what we've become. The house always wins. And we are all the house. And the house is hungry. And Jennifer Knox, FBI agent turned cosmic accountant, feeds it just enough to keep it from feeding on everything. That's the real crime in Vegas. Not the murders or the money laundering or the mob connections. The real crime is that we've all become accomplices in our own consumption, willing participants in a system that feeds on our dreams and excretes probability. But maybe that's not a crime at all. Maybe it's just evolution. Maybe this is what humanity was always meant to become. A species that literally metabolizes hope into reality, that has transformed its economic system into a spiritual, digestive tract. Vegas doesn't hide this truth, it celebrates it, displays it in neon, announces it with every jackpot. The city's honesty about its nature is perhaps its greatest trick. By being openly about consumption, it made us comfortable with being consumed. And Jennifer Knox, guardian of the hunger place, manager of the great audit that never ends, stands at the center of it all. Still FBI in the ways that matter, still investigating, still protecting, still serving. Just on a scale that transcends normal understanding, in a jurisdiction that encompasses everyone who's ever wanted more than they have. The file on the Vegas financial crimes of 1985 is sealed, classified beyond any level I ever had access to. But the truth isn't in the files anyway. It's in every dollar bill, every casino chip, every credit card transaction. It's in the dreams of everyone who's ever gambled, the blood of everyone who's touched money, the soul of an economy built on endless hunger. Vegas won, Jennifer Knox won, the hunger place won. And in winning, they became us, and we became them. And the distinction stopped mattering. The house always wins. We are the house. The house is hungry, and the hunger never ends. Welcome to the new normal. Place your bets. Feed the system that feeds on you. Dream of jackpots while your soul is processed through invisible digestive systems. And remember, Jennifer Knox, the FBI agent who saved the world by helping it evolve into something unrecognizable, something that feeds on itself and calls it prosperity. The great audit never happened. It happens every second, forever. And somewhere beneath the neon, she's still counting, still balancing, still maintaining the impossible equation that keeps us all alive and consumed simultaneously. That's the real Las Vegas story. Not the one in the files, but the one in our blood, our money, our dreams of winning big while knowing the house always wins. Because we are the house, and the house is Jennifer Knox, and Jennifer Knox is the hunger place, and the hunger place is us, forever and ever. Amen. Place your bets.